I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we get into approving the agenda, there needs to be an adjustment. Public comments will be at the end at the norm. It's going to be changed from the norm. Public comments and media comments will be just prior to adjournment. Can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Agenda approved. As far as chair's remarks, I'm sitting in for Tom, who is away because of family illness, and Tom Terry. He's here on a call-in, and the meeting this evening is for information purposes. It's not a regular board meeting; it's a special board meeting, and our general manager will be providing us information with regard to the bids, with regard to either building new or renovating the yacht club. So at this point in time, we'll turn the mic over to Bob Thompson, our general manager.
Thank you. All right, we've got a presentation. I'm hoping not to have to use it. Can you all hear me? The meeting's for you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
In the back. Mr. Clark, you guys okay in the back? Okay, typically talk about, we design the room so if you can't see because I'm moving in front of it, feel free to jump to the sides. We did it for that reason so everyone can see what we're doing. All right, I'm going to cover a PowerPoint presentation. Let me give the board books out. You can follow along. You like that? That was a quick one.
It was very good.
The PowerPoint's in the front of your books.
How much do they weigh? More than you would have known.
Maybe you appreciate that.
Oh so much.
It's this bathroom we're down.
Because I'm special.
Mr. Brodies can work.
Meeting adjourned.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, there it is. We got it all. We can go home and read it.
All right, well, thanks for everybody being here and folks outside because it's a soaking wet day, so I appreciate everybody being here. We're going to talk about where we are with the yacht club. We'll do a quick little, yes,
What you're going to present is not in here?
everything.
Everything is so.
Correct.
You can go, yeah, you can go home now, Pete.
I was going to cover that momentarily. Everything that I'm covering here is in your book. Okay, you also have on page 2, the index is up front. Page 2 actually has the PowerPoint presentation. And then all the supporting documentation, okay, is thereafter. There are a couple minor changes on the PowerPoint that we've made. We printed these with storm coming to make sure the power didn't go out and we lose them. I made a couple tweaks you may or may not notice. There's nothing substantive, just a comma here or a dot there, or one of those types of things. All right, today, can you all see that with the light on? Because I can tap the lights down one. If
Yeah.
It would help. That would help.
No, let's see how this works.
That's
Yeah.
better.
Is that better?
Good.
If I can see that, okay. Okay, we're going to give a quick overview of where we are with everything to include the steps that we've taken to get us to here at this point today. We're going to cover the scope development, which is what we cover when we're looking at the yacht club, whether we renovate or rehab the facility, and what went into building up to that point where we set the information out. We're going to talk about the bids, what we received, how we leveled those bids, the process used when from the inception to where we are today with your book in front of you. When we leveled them, how we leveled them, and what we tried to compare it to as we went through that leveling process. And lastly, where we go from here. I'm going to give you some points of reference for moving forward of what our next steps would be, or our recommendation on the next steps. Okay, just as a quick recap, I put milestones, but basically this is where we traveled so far to get to today. Back in September 2010, we identified under the facility, if you all recall, the pilings, the rotting of the pilings, some of the other conditions we had, And what we did was a temporary fix. The temporary fix was going to give us a 24 to 36 month repair. The most important part of that, if you recall, we sistered up the pilings under the bottom, basically dug down, that hands and knees had our public works team going, they dug down 18 to 24 inches till they found a solid piling, and then they basically shored it up with 2x6 or 2x8s up each side, and they sistered it and put crossbeam. We did have a structural evaluation to identify the ones we needed to fix, and then we had an engineering report tell us how we could temporarily fix those. So that occurred back in December of 2010. We have followed up regularly under the building to make sure that additional pilings, which we knew were going to happen, that continue to rot, that we sistered up more of them, which we have done several times to keep the building safe to operate. Between end of December and June of 2011, we started down the process where we looked at all of our facilities. Okay, if you recall, the first book that we created, okay, that we handed out to the facility planning group where we identified, and every board member received this. There's one in my office if you need to review it. And we went into great detail of all of the facilities we have. We identified 0 to 2, 2 to 5, and 5 and beyond for the, when we were going to need to address those facilities. And then what we did was group them by campus. So that was our next step. Following that, we identified Yacht Club and Country Club. Again, this is just a quick review, so if anybody has any questions, ask me. We followed up, and what we did was sent out for an engineering study on the Yacht Club. The concern was how long would this actually last? We had some structural inspection, but they weren't as aggressive. We had AWB awarded, they went out and did the engineering report for us. We received it back, and we took actions on that. From there, we realized that we did indeed have a building that had significant damage. We had some things that needed to be addressed in the short term, which we did to keep it safe, but they were only short-term temporary fixes. We saw, after bringing it to the board and discussing it, and that's where the next big manual, which you have, and I brought both of them here for us. We identified all the facilities. We went deep into the Yacht Club, talked about what we want to do, develop some design concepts. And you guys remember, that was the path we went on. We presented it. The next step, the board said, we'll go out and take that out in January to the membership. That's what we did. We did our town hall meetings at the beginning of this year. From the town hall meetings, with the town hall meetings and the board input, we further developed a concept. We worked with Becker Morgan to do that, to come up with conceptual plans for the building. We have those plans in the back in the room. If you don't remember what they look like, they're sitting down on the side. The easels actually have the new plans from the bidders. From there, we were able to develop the scope of work. That development of the scope came directly from the AWB engineering report. It wasn't a scope of, hey, we definitely want to do X, Y, or Z. It was, what do we need to do? And the development of the scope came from new building, what would we like, existing building, how do we rehab, look at the AW report to help us, go back to the board and the town hall meetings to identify how to develop that concept. Put the project out for bid back in March. Okay, we did the pre-bid meeting on the 28th, right, Ted? 28th March, we did the pre-bid meeting at the Yacht Club. Approximately 30 contractors or parts of contractors, when I say parts, subcontractors showed up, and additional people came to see what we were doing. We did that presentation and put it out to bid that day. The bid included a disc, included the scope of work for both the rehab and a new building. Okay, two separate scopes. And we asked the bidders to either bid on one, both, or neither. From there, we started receiving bids back. We got it back in May, late May. From that point today, we've been leveling the bids, and that's what we're presenting to you today. Okay? The third little item here is the next installment of your process of getting the Yacht Club either renovated or rehabbed, and that's the book you have in front of you. Development of the scope. When we started to develop the scope of work for the project, there were a couple of key elements. For the rehab, okay, the scope of work was developed specifically from the AWB engineering report. Keep in mind, we had years of other reports, 10-year task force, other Soule reports that we knew the type of issues we had, combined with the AWB report allowed us to develop that scope pretty quickly. The new scope of work that we need to develop, okay, came out of, we built off of the rehab, off of the AWB engineering, because we knew what we were doing. We said, okay, but if we won't need that level of repair if we build new. So what we did was go from our concept drawings, our town hall meetings, and board input, and develop the concept for the structure, and that's what we presented. That's when it went out to the bid. Everybody follow that? Questions so far? Scope of work. Here are the things that were included, and you have a scope in your board packets, okay? The scope's been available, it was online, all the bidders got it. It was also put on the disc that we gave out to the bidders. Cover page, table of contents, two easy ones, doesn't take a lot of explanation on it. This was the meat of it. Project info and introduction to the bidders to explain what we were doing, what we were hoping to receive, both on the rehab. We had two separate scopes that were out there, one on rehab, one on rebuild. What our expectations were when we sent the paperwork out, what we wanted to see in return. Overview of the project, description of the project, defined terms, pre-bid meeting, site visits, investigation, documentation, laws and building codes, things that were going to be applicable for us, not just today, but some of the 2012 codes that are coming into play. We need to make sure that the new facility, if we were going to go with new, we need to make sure that we were building it to the new code. Anything that's going to be renovated needed to be brought up to current code. Contract timing, insurance request, retention, bidding information, proposal submission, modification, withdrawals, and opening. All the procedures of what we wanted were clearly laid out in the scope of work. And then how we were going to award the info. Questions so far? Scope of work included three sets, section A, B, and C, general, the work that needed to be completed, and the alternates. Alternates being things like geothermal. Anything else we allowed the bidders, because we did a modified design build. When we say alternates, if you had something different than we put, if you could meet the scope, but you had a different alternative you thought would be helpful, present it to us. We would certainly look at it. Geothermal was one of them. You know, geothermal, whether we should go with that or not, and what would be the pros and cons. Bid form, Appendix A, list of all attachments to the scope of work. After the bids went out, we started to receive some RFIs, requests for information. We actually had 4 of those. And instead of just providing, if Builder A called us and requested information about the project, we wanted to make sure that everyone had the advantage of the question and, more importantly, of the answer. So every time a question would come in, we would put them on a sheet, and then we would put them out for everybody. And then we ended up with 4 RFIs. Questions about that? Here are the bids here are the contractors that we received bids back from. For the rehab, Lehman, Nason, and Temco. New construction, Dozer, Gillis, Harkins, Lehman, and Nason. These were all identified. We did it in a bid opening, if you recall. We did it in the boardroom, announced the bidder and the amount. Okay. The bids came back, which is getting us to where we are today. When they came back, we actually we had multiple copies. And what we did was take a copy and independently reviewed them before any of us spoke. And when I say any of us, I reviewed all the bids, Ted Maroney reviewed all the bids, and Joe Costello reviewed all the bids. Everyone I think is familiar with Ted. Ted's worked with us on the 10-year task force. He was instrumental in getting this building completed for us. He has property here, has a significant construction background, has been helping me through this whole process. Joe Costello, on the other hand, actually had a lot of the information gathered on the 10-year task force. He was extremely instrumental in the construction with this project here that we're standing in, this building. So independently, we all took and started going through the bids. The reason that's important is what I wanted to see is what conclusions we came up with individually before we got in a room and started talking about it. Because the last thing you want to do is be influenced unduly by one of the others. Because we all have respect for each other. So if we're going through this, and I go, okay, well, maybe Ted's right or Joe's right on this. We independently came up with our the order of folks that we felt how the bids fell in. The interesting part when that came out is that we all landed within the top three. Were all the same for the new construction. Ted, would you say that's correct? And the rehab, when we talk about it, you'll see the rehab became crystal clear when we went through this. Okay, but we all ended up with the same top three builders independently of one another, and then we sat down and talked about the pros and cons and decided if we felt the same way after we all got together and shared the information. Ted's going to talk to you about the rehab. One of the things Ted did, he took the lead on reaching out to all the contractors. He was the point of contact for us. His extensive contracting background, he made the contacts, the follow-up contacts for each of the builders. He developed a spreadsheet that allowed us to level the bids. And what we're trying to do here today is give you how the companies fell in and why and what the amounts were. And again, when you're trying to get apples to apples, it was real important to get a good comparison, to talk clearly about did you include this, did you not include that, and why.
Just the rehab he's talking about?
Just the rehab. When we received the bids here, we had three bids, Lehman, Temco, and Nason, and I'll go ahead and cut to the chase on one of these. Temco's bid came in at about $1.158 million. And those of you who were at the bid opening saw that we kind of started to look at that a little bit closely. And it turned out that the forms that they had bid on were the same forms that they had bid the job on in 2010. So that happened over Memorial Day weekend. On Tuesday morning after the holiday, I called their contact chief estimator and I said, hey, I'm looking at this, and this is the same number you gave us when all we were doing was exterior piles. We weren't doing any of the interior piles. I want you to just check and make sure you've got the scope. He said, okay. And that was the end of that conversation. On Wednesday, I called back because normally you'd be able to check your scope pretty quick and make sure whether you've got something or not. Left a message. On Thursday, I contacted him again, and he said, it looks like we have a problem. Can I have the weekend to work through it? I said, sure, but, I need to move forward here as we go. On the Monday after Memorial Day, a week later, I called and talked to him, and he said that basically they bid the scope that they had bid in 2010. And in fact, the bid was almost identical number for number down there, and that they had apparently not even read or gone through in detail.
Ted, I looked at those yesterday. One other thing they did was the exact same timetable that they had given 2 years earlier. So
We were pretty sure it was a problem.
it was the old proposal.
Their cover letter was updated, but the emails it referenced were dated from 2010.
Detailed construction schedule was 2 years ago.
So they basically dropped out at that point. So that bid became null and void. So we ended up with two bids, Nason and Lehman. And I'm just going to kind of go through a little bit here. What we did is we asked them to break that bid down. Give us what the cost of our exterior part of the scope is, the envelope of the building, the siding, the decks, capping all of the piles, fixing the first floor bathroom since we were going to be underneath, pulling all the plumbing and everything out. Anything that would be building envelope. Lehman gave us a breakdown. Nason only gave us a lump sum. They did not break it down. So that their price there at $3.8 million is for both the interior and the exterior. Okay, we go to the exterior. So you can see the differences here. Lehman was about 1.4 for the exterior and about 1 million for the interior. That was the subtotal of the two bids. At that point, we did not have any more discussions with Nason. If you took their bid at $3.8 million, it was higher than every other bid, including every bid for a new building except their own bid. They were at 3.8 approximately for renovating and at about 3.9 for new. So at that point it was, and if you read it, it was pretty much a check price in there.
Also, as I went through documents yesterday, I noticed that where Lehman put in a cost for geothermal energy, Mason didn't put in any information.
Yeah, if you looked at what they did, they their other plan was to tear down the building right where it was and rebuild it on the same footprint. So they were going right back in on the same footprint, but they were trying to use our new concept design that, quite frankly, won't fit on the same footprint. So it was, it's not unusual sometimes to get in the game to throw a check price out that's out there, and they had the number that was high enough to cover themselves. So they were basically out of it. So Temco didn't have the scope. Nason was more than it would have cost us to build a new building. So we were here with Lehman. We added a 20% contingency, and everybody may ask why that. That's the same contingency when we leveled the bids here that we use. And the reason the contingency is high on an existing building, all I have to do is go to fact. When we've taken siding off, when we take the decks off, when we take everything off of that building, we are liable to find rot underneath there. We've found it before. We just did a repair over there on the corner a while back where we had to replace a column. So the contingency in there is for the unknowns, in particular because this is an existing building. Same percentage we used in the past. There was our total bids then. 2.97 from Lehman. That can be broken down, again, for exterior and interior. We did that on purpose so people could identify. And if you added the Nason bid in with a 20% contingency, I mean, we were out of sight at 4.5. So a couple of other additional considerations we had asked for in the bid. ADA is a big deal, in particular going forward, and it's hard to get a straight answer exactly whether it's a percentage of the building that you have to be working on, a percentage of the floor, of the total cost versus the value of the building. Where do you take that value as? Is it replacement value or not? We just asked, give us a price if we had to go ADA to that third floor where the offices are. Only way to do that is to put an elevator in, and they had basically, from Lehman, they gave us a price on that. Meet wind codes. We were a little bit concerned about, under the new 2012 IDOC code, whether we were going to have to meet the newer wind codes. Lehman had that included in their price. Nason, who knows? We never got that far with them. The other thing is, on the roof, we did not ask for a new roof on the building. We did say that they had to fix and repair anything on the exterior decks. When they wrecked the exterior decks, they had to fix that. We did say we wanted to put a new protective coating on top of the flat roof, which was a recommendation of AWB. Lehman, when they looked at it, went ahead and included in their bid putting an entire roof on, because their feeling was by the time they chopped the decks off and ruined the roof around the perimeter, it was actually less expensive to come in and re-roof it rather than try to match the roofing there. So this is before adding anything in for the contingency. Nason was 3.8, bid was equal or higher than new. Lehman was 2.47, complete bid including roof. And again, in your notebook, if you want to break it down by the exterior package and the interior package, it's there, so you can take a look at that. Temco 1.15, bid provided same as 2 years ago, and I did have numerous conversations with them over that. Conclusion, obviously we've got one bidder that's in there. Lehman provided the most complete package going forward here. The other thing that I will say is that when you read your scopes, remember, the layout doesn't change in the kitchens. None of the columns change in there. This is basically the scope of work we have. You end up with an upgraded building, but primarily the same building that we had before. So, go back one. So that's really where we are, right in here with theirs, although you could break that out and take that exterior and 20% or the interior and 20% if you wanted. If you decide to go rehab, you can break the project up if you want to. That's where it is.
Did they provide a time frame
To do that
as part of their bid?
Yes. provided it up front or we asked him for it. I think he had 10 months maximum, start to finish. Yeah. I think he had 10 months.
10 months from authorization to proceed.
Yeah. Dependent on permits.
Oh, that's it.
Dave.
Yeah, just something you just said. I found it difficult looking at the statement of work. Of course, this is our second time around. We had a statement of work, the last time around. And basically we had a company of interior drawings and so forth. What you're saying, you can't hear me?
Oh, okay.
Might be on purpose.
Okay, no, it certainly wasn't. The last time, there were interior drawings that went, the renovation, actually, in fact, did significantly change the kitchen areas, and it changed the location of the freezer, and so forth and so on. There were no comparable drawings in this renovation package, so you really couldn't, I didn't know what we were actually going to do. I mean, I can read all the paragraphs and the words, but it didn't seem to change anything. In other words, it's going to be exactly like it is.
And that was, we took that AWB report and we basically, it did not talk about, it did have a couple of paragraphs in it about aesthetics and flow and stuff like that, but it was so subjective that we didn't include it. If you remember the last time we bid it, we also bid it with ads to bump out corners and stuff like that, to do that. Didn't bid any of that. We basically took the AWB report and if it said, hey, we need to replace the siding, we put that in. Replace electrical, we put that in. Replace the decks, put that in. For instance, up on the roof, it said the flat roof's fine, just coat it. That's exactly what was in the scope of work. Fine, just coat it. So we did not go any further than what that AWB report said. We didn't try to go in and say, hey, we want you to bid a redesign of the kitchen to make the flow better or put other things in there. Maybe we should have, but we didn't.
Yeah, despite the fact that you had a whole lot less, the price was a whole lot more, if I recall correctly, but I didn't go back and look, but although I could, I have the old report.
It might well have been, Dave. I don't remember.
That's 2.3. Yeah, it was about 2.3 last time. And we put a lot of stuff in there, as has already been said last time. We said if we're going to do it, we might as well do this and this and this, right?
We did not
And you
put that
do
in
that
this time. Correct.
Okay.
Other questions? So again, this is without the 20% in, but there you are. Basically, we've got one price we consider to be good, and that's the Lehman number there. And again, that's broken down into the exterior and the interior. Okay, let's move to new construction. And let me tell you what I'm going to do is kind of run through the numbers and run through the levels. Then we're going to bring all three of the bidders that we're presenting to you today up here, and we'll walk through to kind of do a comparison. Okay, here's this layout, here are the pluses and minuses, so you can kind of get a feel of this. Sometimes it's a little difficult. We ended up with 5 bidders on the job. Go back real quick. Okay. We ended up with 5 bidders, and first let me tell you how we got down to just 3 that we're presenting today. Nason bid the job similar to the rehab. Same type of scope. You really couldn't tell exactly what you had in there. Again, it was a rebuild right on the thing. They were at just under $4 million, just shaded $4 million. That was their base going in, 3.998. We didn't have enough information from them. They had about $100,000, $190,000 between rehabbing the building and new. There just wasn't enough information in there. And the surprising part about that is they listed Becker Morgan as their architect who had done our concept drawing. So we were a little surprised we didn't have a little bit more detail and stuff firing forward. So we eliminated them early on. Dozier, as those of you who remember who were at the bid opening, provided us 2 prices. One, $1.5 million as a budget price, not including tearing down the existing building. And the second was 2.5, including tearing down the building. So apparently it was going to cost $1 million to tear down the existing yacht club. So I volunteered to be on that demo. As a sub. So what ended up happening is those were budget numbers. We would have had to do a lot of chasing. It was really non-responsive. So we eliminated Mason up at the top and Dozier down at the bottom as both being budgets. And we have Gillis, Lehman, and Harkins as our three bidders to present. First thing is, and this is after leveling, because we had all different square foots and all different sizes. What we did is we went back and we gave them some parameters, as I'll run through here during the leveling. And what we ended up with is this is their approximate square footage as of today. This is the original bid price. Gillis is at 2.579, Lehman at 3.59, and Harkins at 3.884. During the process of looking at this, some enclosed the first floor, some enclosed part of the first floor, some didn't include any of the first floor enclosed. And from the public town hall meetings that were held in January, originally we had kind of an open air concept down there, and one of the pushbacks was when it's the temperature it was yesterday here, we need a place to be able to go inside. We don't need it for 400 people. We need a place to move 120, 130 people inside in a cool thing. So we went back to them and we said, okay, what's it going to take to have you enclosed? And we said, use 150 as a ballpark number, 150 people inside. And Gillis already had it in their price, as did Harkins, and Lehman had an ad of $193,255, and that includes bringing all the AC, heat, air conditioning, and closing the thing with glass and everything else. Add a full kitchen. When we got the original bids, we had Gillis put the kitchen on the first floor, Harkins had a kitchen on both floors, Lehman had the kitchen on the second floor, and a partial kitchen on the first floor. In talking to the experts that we had, in addition to our people, and the idea of trying to be able to run everything from one kitchen on one floor to be able to serve, say, 200 people upstairs and at the same time be serving outside, even with a dumbwaiter and a service elevator, it didn't make any sense to try to do it that way. So we went back and we asked the bidders to go ahead and make sure that we had a kitchen on each floor. The upper kitchen, which would be the in the catering area in the bigger room, would basically also be the prep kitchen, so that you could shorten up the kitchen downstairs. So they could do the prep upstairs. There's a service elevator in each of the kitchens to run down. It just runs kitchen to kitchen. And that way the kitchen on the first floor could be a little bit smaller. The ad prices were $8,500 for Gillis, $163 for Lehman. The duck grill. If you remember, our original scope out there had a grill that was kind of an indoor-outdoor grill on there. When we looked through this with the idea that we're going to enclose the first floor with the amount of space, it just didn't make sense to do it. At some time in the future, if they want to put a grill outside, great. But at this point, it didn't make any sense. So we went back and we asked the three bidders, okay, come back to us and deduct that out. Harkins never included it. Okay, this is why you got to go through leveling, because they didn't include it. Lehman gave us a credit of $7,500 and $19,484 from Gillis. Reduce the floor plan. Originally, Lehman took our concept drawings, scaled the whole thing out, and built the building to that. When we went back to them, we said, hey, build it to only have to enclose the 150 on the first floor. And don't, use a little bit of common sense here, and don't try to, use some sense, squeeze the rooms, fix the thing correctly, and go from there. So while they added $193,000 to enclose it, they gave us a $422,000 credit because they were able to shrink the building. That brought them from, instead of up around 24,000 square feet, back to about 20,000 square feet. So that 422 is really a credit of about 3,000 square feet in the building, which then again kind of levels them across this line. We've got basically the same size buildings we're talking about. Additional A&E work. A&E is architectural and engineering. Okay. Neither Gillis nor Harkins came back with anything there. Lehman had an additional $20,000 in order to redesign and do that that they were adding to their bid. Deduct landscape. We excluded having landscaping in our scope, but Harkins included landscaping in the scope here. And so we went ahead and said, okay, what is the value of that? You've included it. We want to back it out because we're going to include it on a bottom line down here. We want everybody to be as level as possible. So we backed out the $16,570 for Harkins. It should have had brackets. Bob didn't do a good job typing. It does on my sheet. You should have just uploaded my Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so we deducted landscaping. Permits. Gillis did not have permits in. That would be depending on what the cost was. What we did is both Lehman and Harkins had permits in there, and they had them broken out for us. We took the Lehman cost for permits and stuck it right in here so that all three of them have permits in the price. Covered entrance. Gillis did not have a covered entrance originally where you could pull up and not get covered with what's going on out here. Both Lehman and Harkins did. We went back to Gillis and said, hey, what's the cost of a covered entrance? They came back to us at $65,840. We added it in. They all three have it in. Upstairs bar. You'll see a little of this as we go along. The originally, without a kitchen upstairs, Gillis had put their bar inside and used it inside and did not have the second floor bar to serve the catering area. The other two did, based on their designs. And we went back and we said, okay, Gillis, go ahead and get us equal. Get us the bar upstairs the same as it is on the other two. Their number was $118,675. Again, on Gillis, as you came in the front door, they had an elevator that went to the second floor, but they did not have an interior staircase that went to the second floor. And obviously, we felt there needed to be a way to get up and down there on the interior there. The other two did, so we had them go ahead and they redid their interior stair lobby, which added $38,640 to it. There were miscellaneous upgrades that they did for us, which are broken out in your booklet. They added some architectural features and some other things in there. If you look at one of, there's a couple emails in there. One is about 5 pages of questions, and the other is some requests for different things. You know, how are we at? And they came back to us. I don't have the breakdown in front of me on that, but it's in your book. And that was the idea, to try to get them close up to where everybody else was in terms of scope. Builder's risk policy, Gillis and Lehman both had. When we go through insurances, we spelled out the amount of insurance everybody had to carry for GL, workers' comp, auto, and everything else like that, including a builder's risk policy. Gillis and Lehman had it in. Harkins did, and I talked to Don Smith, who's the chief estimator over there and is handling this project. He gave me the number 2,800. We plugged it in. Everybody's got the same insurance across the board. Aluminum roof. Gillis had shingles. Lehman had a seamless roof, 24 gauge, I think, and Harkins had kind of a combination, 27 gauge aluminum with some shingles. Okay, I'm not a roofing expert. We got to do a little bit more work on that, but in order to get them close, the cost of the aluminum roof and the shingles was about equal to the cost of the seamless roof that Lehman had. So we asked, I think actually we got a seamless roof from Gillis. We asked for an up price on that so that they all had basically the same roof in there. And then we'll make a decision. We do a little bit more research on aluminum versus seamless along the water there. So they added that in. Security system, the other two had security systems in their bid. This one didn't. We added that from them. Phone and data, same thing. We added that in there. These prices now, the 102, the 7 to 5, came directly from us from Gillis, and you'll see them in your documentation. So we reached out to them and said, hey, what do you got to do here to get us here? Pavers. Harkins had an $85,500 in for pavers, which extended out not only over the old building site, but to other sites. Price may not be bad, but the other two did not have that in there, so we backed that out at this point. Bond adjustment. When we got done adding in these numbers here for Gillis, all the companies had about a 1% bond fee. So you had a net add in there, so we added in the $3,700 for the bond, and we subtracted the $1,000 for the bond over here for Harkins. Deduct dumbwaiter, that was included in any of the other numbers that were provided to us. Lehman gave us a separate breakout. Once you moved a kitchen to the second floor, as long as you had a service elevator that was feeding the kitchen, there was no need to have a second dumbwaiter elevator in there. It's just redundant. So that was a $30,000 savings. Subtotal of the bids across the line there, after we go through the adjustment, are here. Contingency, we added a 7% contingency. That's the exact same contingency we used on this building. Originally, we were going to go with 5. Wiser voices on the board, including Mr. Rakow and Mr. Clark, both said I was nuts when I said 5 when we went to 7, and that's what we used on this building. So we have 7% in there, giving us a subtotal here across the board. But that's not it. Yeah. We don't transpose any of these numbers. Okay, then we get to some more. Now, this is what we've done is if you take a look at the footprint of the existing building, and imagine the building isn't there, and you've chopped the whole building down, you've chopped the little concrete walls down, you've cut off the piles to below grade. What goes back in there? We had numbers all over the place, and that's something the board is going to have to look at the area down in there. And we had from a sand fill of $17,000 to fill that area with sand until the board decides what they're going to do with that whole complex, to about $85,500 to put pavers in that area. So what we did is we plugged the 17 in for now. That's a decision that needs to be made at a level a couple above my pay grade here. So we plugged the 17 in to sand fill it, but you've got to take a look at what you've got. You really got to look at that whole area out there because you're opening such a huge area. What do you want to do? And you certainly don't want to do one thing and then end up coming back 2 years later and ripping it and everything else out. So I kind of think we plugged a number in there that you could fill it with sand temporarily if you wanted to, but really when you see where the building sits, if you go new, when you see where the building sits, you really got to then look at the rest of it and make a decision how you want it.
Okay, I haven't looked at the plans up on the wall yet, but what you're really telling us is that in fact the new building will be not on the same site.
That is correct. It's going to be forward and cocked a little bit so that instead of looking at the homes across there, you're looking out through the bay, and there will be a lot more deck space out back than there currently is now.
Thank you.
So that's it. We put the 17 in until a decision is made as to the whole area.
But you've got 86 as the max of that decision?
Well, 86 was pavers. That was a price from Harkins to go in. You know, they own their own concrete company. That was a price they go in. They could do stamped concrete. They could do pavers. They could do a whole lot. We didn't get done exploring some of that because you're sitting in there and you're also subject to tides and everything else. And, you know, we plugged a number in.
Okay.
2012 Energy Code. We checked both Lehman and Harkins in their bid said they were up to the 2012 Energy Code. Gillis was at the 2009. We spoke an hour and a half ago, and we just double-checked on the air locks, which is some of the code here to keep treated air from going outside. And we gave me the number of things, and we stuck a number in that we agreed on, and also based on what other bidders had in there to address to make sure we were at that Energy Code going forward. Fuel storage relocation. If you know, we've got some fuel storage tanks off to the side that will have to be relocated when the building came up. We told them during the bid, don't worry, Ocean Pines has it. But then it turned around that 2 of the 3 bidders included the relocation. So we got a price on what's it going to cost to relocate it, and since Gillis didn't have it, we added it to Gillis's price so that they all three now have the relocation of the tanks. Signage, phone, and wiring. Okay, and these are all Ocean, these are all either adjustments to theirs or Ocean Pine costs. Some of this in here, when we get down to signage, phone, and wire, would be costs that we would have, that we would be adding, that we wouldn't add to their contract, that we would have. What I did is I went back and I actually pulled up the Excel spreadsheet that we kept on this building, and I went in and I took a look and I said, where is the stuff that we missed when we bid this building? What did we miss? Where, we didn't have signage when we bid this building. We didn't think about it as a line item. We have phone and wiring in here, but there's actually a cost to get the phone systems and to get the wiring systems and stuff moved over. So I went back in and I went through that in detail and came up with the numbers that we had and then added a little bit to it for the inflation that doesn't exist today. Added a little to make sure that we had enough money to move our current systems over here and we had enough for signage. And signage would be things like having the exit signs over there and above, we have the exit above the door, they give it back, but the other exit signs that are required by, for us, if we put a name on a door, that kind of stuff.
Tom, you have a question? Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, this was the next thing was, and you'll notice that now that we're into the point where, as we're adding the total prices up, we finished the contractors up there. Now we're adding in the Ocean Pine stuff that we need to add to give the total bid price. So each contractor gets assigned the same amount, okay, because that's a cost we've got regardless of who the contractor is. This is to disconnect, move, and reinstall kitchen equipment. Met with our Public Works people. The portion of the kitchen equipment that we can use out of the yacht club if you go new, that's our physical cost to move it and move it over to the building. Kitchen consultant, we've plugged in a number, to have a number in there right now. We don't know what the cost is. I believe the board wanted to make sure, and you'll see a little bit, some of them have laid out some stuff in the kitchen, but I believe the board wanted, once we picked a contractor, to get a kitchen consultant in to make sure we were double checked on it. So we've just plugged $5,000 in. It might be $1,000. I don't know, but we plugged a $5,000 number in there because we wanted to make sure we showed something for an expense that we're going to have. We just don't know for sure what that's going to be yet. New kitchen equipment. This number basically is taking the new equipment that we'll need plus the old stuff that we have to be able to make 2 complete kitchens there. There will also be some other equipment that can possibly be moved to other places around Ocean Pines. In here, we've actually figured where we were trying to save the freezers before, we figured the cost of 2 new freezers in there. And the reason is that we started examining the floors on those freezers, and the ones that are on the front of the yacht club behind there, the floors are in pretty rough shape. So if we can save it, we're going to save it and use it. If we can't, we did plug the number in here to make sure that we weren't kidding ourselves that, oh yeah, you plan on using that thing and then bang, here you go, you get out there and you lift the thing up and the floor falls out of it. So we included that in there.
Ted, who's the we who looked at the kitchen equipment?
Our Public Works team, Butch, I don't know if you know him, he knows that.
I did not hear that question. Could you repeat the question when you answer it? Thank you.
Sure, Tom, I asked who decided what the new kitchen equipment would be, and Bob is answering that question.
Yeah, Butch with our Public Works department, he's the one that actually put them together.
Yep.
The walk-ins are actually, it's almost like a Lego set the way they come together.
I know what that is.
He went over and double-checked them for us to see and identified. We knew we had some issues on the floor, and that was his biggest concern, so that's why we went and priced new. If when we take them apart, you're able to replace the floor plan or the floor pan itself, and the others come apart, the walls come apart, the roof, we'll reuse it. If it doesn't, we need to make sure we had enough built into it so we didn't have an oops or
So that new kitchen equipment price of $159.5 is essentially the freezer.
Yes.
No, it's also,
Two refrigerators and an ice machine.
that's the last part. There was also stuff before that, wasn't there a list of other stuff that we needed, some burners and other stuff?
Yeah, but he said it includes, doesn't
Oh, I thought he said that was the whole amount. Is that
No, I
what-
was just trying to get to.
Yeah, it's all included in that, so everything for the two kitchens.
Anything.
Yeah, I'm still back, all right, I'm gonna go back to square A on that.
Yeah.
Who's they? It's not just Butch.
Butch did it.
Yeah.
Our Bear and Terry, who are the
Yeah.
chefs over there,
Yeah.
worked on what equipment needs to be replaced. David went and looked at the equipment needs
So
to be replaced.
David's had a shot at it.
What's
David's
that?
had our new,
Yes, all looked at it to figure out what would be needed. And some of the equipment, like some of the price also includes, and we didn't break it down here, but I have a spreadsheet and show you, some new stoves, and they're commercial level stoves, like a Vulcan
Yeah.
stove, so they're long-term, and those type of things. So they went through and they took they walked through the kitchen item by item, and identified what was working, what wasn't working. And then we had Butch come in behind separately to validate. So we had multiple people looking at it to see where we were and what repairs. Not unlike what we did at the Country Club recently to figure out what we need to do with the equipment upstairs. They have Wolf equipment up there, and we've got the failing burners and those type of things. So we know we have a pretty good idea of what definitely needs to be replaced. And what we weren't sure of, we went ahead and threw it in the bid, so we knew that it was at least there for us. If we don't use it, we don't use it.
okay, thank you.
Sure?
But as you said earlier, the intention is, and you put some number in there to have another consultant or outside consultant come in and evaluate, right?
And Pete, understand that the reason it's not more definitive, we have 3 different contractors. They work with their people. We talk specifically about needing that, and when we go over the schematics of the projects in a few minutes, you're going to see they're each a little different. We'll have a designer give us, once we say, here's the contractor, we'll then immediately engage, and we're going to show you that later, with the kitchen consultant to make sure that they identify exactly the layout and the equipment needed.
And therefore, this is all that's needed for this point at this stage of the
We
process.
felt that was correct.
This is if we were replacing what we had, plus using what we have to get 2 complete kitchens. Now, when the kitchen consultant comes in, there's layout issues, there's how the room is set up, and also, I would hope that the kitchen consultant might be able to give us some insight. Like, we may be saying we want to use ABC 1, 2, 3, and they come in and say, well, wait a minute, this is where the industry's going, this is where you need to be, this is why. And those are the adjustments. I mean, if you're going to hire a consultant, it's not just to lay the thing out. It's to kind of move you so that whatever we get, working with our people, working with what we're trying to do, give us what we need going forward.
So that's a future step in the process.
That's
Part of
a
the next step.
Yeah, part of the
Right,
next
okay.
step. There.
Good.
But rather than bring in the consultant and look at
Sure.
3 different drawings before you guys make
No,
a
no.
decision, we said, we'll
Makes
plug
sense.
him in,
Makes sense.
we'll plug in what we think we've got to have for equipment, worst case, and then when we get the consultant in, that gets cleaned up. Ansel system, that's your fire system there. What we're going to do is we're going to move the current fire systems that we have at the yacht club over to the new one. We put in the money that it cost us. We've actually got pricing on it to move it over. We may have to expand or contract it a little bit. It's the automatic fire system that's over the top of the burners and everything that comes on. Landscaping, Harkins had 16,750, as you know, which we took as a credit here. We stuck 18.5 in. We may not be as efficient doing it, but we felt. I also went back and again, I pulled out what it cost here when we did this job versus there. I also picked Harkins' brain a little bit and said, hey, you're somewhat below what it cost us to do it last time. And one of their plans, which we haven't investigated yet, is they were going to take some of the plantings and stuff, bushes and shrubs that are out in front and around the existing yacht club, take them somewhere, somebody's backyard, keep them for the time being that the building was being built, and then bring a lot of that back because they thought a lot of the shrubs in there were good. I don't know whether that's feasible or not, so I stuck an extra $1,000-something in here just to try to make sure we were covered one way or the other. That's the total we come up with here now as we start to go across the bottom here. This is OPA's cost, contractor's cost level, 7% contingency on the contractor's costs, subtotal right across there.
Hey, Bill, I have a couple of questions if I could sneak them in here.
You're on, Tom. Go ahead, buddy.
Thank you. The streaming, I'm not, at this point, I'm not seeing the slides you're seeing, so
Okay.
I've been listening. Just three questions. Does the pricing that is in front of you include all the decking that is proposed for the back of the building? Not the sand fill area that they talked about where the building is now, but is the decking in the price? Or the walkout deck on the back of the yacht club? Is that in the price, or is that a separate or better?
No, the only when the building's built, any decks that are showing on the building, like on the second floor coming out or on the first floor or on either side, is included in the price. The only thing we'd have to deal with is the old footprint.
Okay. That's in there. That's good. Okay. What about a backup generator for the facility to keep food safe if the power goes out, that kind of thing?
Not included. We're just going to put a notice out that everybody can get free food. No, it's not included in here at this time.
Okay. And my last question is, and it's, I don't know, I just thought of it. Is there any thought of sound system of anything, or is that something that is a whole separate function of the new building?
Both, but we have pricing in here for wiring of those areas, but not with the, at least one contractor felt that our sound system was adequate, but the wiring is included. We then have to decide whether that sound system is adequate for what we want there or not.
Okay.
Any follow-up questions?
That was my question so far. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, then we move into some options here. Geothermal. We asked, because of the long-term cost savings, what would it be in this new building to give us a geothermal system going forward? Gillis is at $215, Lehman's at $263, $949. Harkins is at $453. But Harkins did not propose a geothermal system. They have kind of a variable refrigerant system. And the easiest way for me to explain that is if you think about having the kitchen and the dining room on the same zone. And you can turn, if the same heat pump or whatever you're using, if you can control it in each zone, but you either have to have heat or you have to have electricity, or you have to have air conditioning. What they're talking about is a system that allows you to have air conditioning running in the kitchen and the heating to be running out at the same time in the main room. But after I got done looking at this, I talked to a couple other contractors, I talked to some other people about it. If you really wanted to do that, it would be cheaper for you to put in a separate heat pump system for each area you wanted, and then you could control it maximum because it's nearly twice the amount.
Now, I thought we had a geothermal specialist look at this area, and he said it really wasn't compatible for geothermal at that location.
Not that I know of.
I don't know where that.
Yeah, they had geothermal guys come out. Bill?
Okay.
If you know who said that, Ray, I'd like to know.
I don't.
I've never heard that.
Ted, in your area of expertise, can you give us a rationale for the difference of $50,000 between Gillis and Lehman?
No.
On the geothermal?
Yeah,
Gillis and Lehman.
Yeah, Gillis and Lehman is $50,000.
On the geo?
Yes.
I don't know. We'll have to see what it is. A lot depends on where they were put in the field, because they've got to drill all these wells down in there. And, if you're drilling wells in the parking lot out there, you're repairing asphalt as well, because you've got to bring it back to where you were. So there may be, I don't know enough because we didn't get that far with them. But we also saw in some other things that there were wide ranges in bids on the geothermal part.
Right.
Well, the other thing that you haven't done is a real long-term or lifetime cost analysis of this.
As to whether, we asked them for estimated cost savings, and most of them say they give you, somebody gave us 17,000, somebody said a 20% savings. But part of once a contractor is picked is to go back in and be able to come back to the board and say, look, if you spend, say, halfway in between there, $235,000 on a system, here is your payback in X number of years based on what we're doing. Because without that, you can't make a real informed decision whether to go forward with it.
In my limited experience just with my home, I found that there was a payback over about a 25-year period, but the lifespan of the equipment was somewhere between 10 and 15 years.
25.
Yeah.
I tell you, looking through the materials yesterday, excuse me, Pete, looking through the materials yesterday, Harkins was saying that it would be a $17,050 savings, but their projected cost, when I figured it out, it'd be 27 years before you
Yeah.
regain the
And
cost.
and I think that's the thing.
Hey, Bill, one clarifying question here. This number here for geothermal, is that the net number when you remove from the original price the price of a different kind of heating system?
Yeah, this
So,
is an ad.
or is this the price of geothermal?
This is an
And
ad.
the price of the other, I'll call it a heat pump system, would have to be subtracted from the total?
No, this is a net ad.
Net ad.
Net ad.
Net
Okay,
ad.
the net ad.
Net
Okay,
ad.
thank you.
Now, I think it's important, exactly what you're saying, is that we go through and do this, because when you have other people in the community say, why aren't you going with geothermal? You want to be able to say, okay, at X dollars, we're going to save $17,000. Guess what? The life of the equipment is 12 years or whatever it is. And, oh, by the way, when you replace this equipment, it doesn't cost you the full amount, but if you're going to spend another $100,000, you've just extended that life out forever and ever. And the other thing, if you do go with a new building, you already are building in a lot more energy efficiency than we currently have in there. So we priced it because there were questions from a couple of Ocean Pine committees at one time about making sure you had a number for that. But I think as you started it, Dan, and went all the way back and forth down the table, we really need to look at what the cost-benefit effect is if it goes there. All right, summary. Let me. All right. In looking at this, then, and this is kind of puts the whole thing together. Let me start at the. Why do you have this number different here? Okay. OPA cost should be the same all the way across. I gotta keep you away from the typewriter here.
Whoa. I asked you about that today, and you had your reasoning.
No, they should all be the same for OPA cost. Okay. Okay. What you have here is the cost with the contingency. This is the bond number from the contractors. This is the fees and permits, and what they basically do on this is an allowance. And let me give you an example. When we did this building, Lehman did this building with a $20,000 permit allowance. By the time we got done with the job, we took a $20,000 deduct from them, paid $951.81 for permits, and then about another $5,000 in there for other things like a final site survey plan that we needed and some other stuff that we needed. But we ended up saving about $10,000 or $12,000 on it. So what each of we plugged this one into Gillis's because they didn't have a number, but we used Lehman's to be conservative with them going across there. Design. This is the design cost for each of these contractors. Okay. Gillis at 140, Lehman at 60, and Harkins at 172. And the real reason for the huge difference is everybody at Lehman, their structural engineers, all of their designers are on staff. Okay, so they're paying that guy whether they do one building or another. Harkins, for instance, had a letter in their proposal, which you'll see in there from AWB. They actually gave me a breakdown of this. If we move forward with them and prior to referendum in a Phase A contract similar to what we did on this building, their fee was $11,000. The other $161,000 would go to AWB. Okay, so they're paying an outside set of architects, engineers, and designers to do it. So there's a big delta in here as you go, and a lot depends on what you have in-house as far as going forward. So that gets us up to kind of the bottom line here as far as where we're at now. Now let me say a couple other quick things here off script slightly.
What's the OPA cost constant before you go away from that? 235.
235A.
They should all be 235.
They should all be 235A.
Thank
In
you.
fact, if I,
5.78 or something like that.
yeah, I can.
It should be $3,384,859.
Okay, I was $3,000 off. Thanks, Tom.
So that gets there. The first thing I want to say is that I've had extensive conversations. Nancy Bolt's been my contact over at Gillis, Jeff Nouse at Lehman, and Don Smith at Harkins. I have probably talked to each of them anywhere between 10 and 15 times since we bid the job, back and forth, and trying to make sure. I talked to all three of them today, again, and to all of them yesterday. So as we went through and we started to look at these bids, part of this was, some of this stuff was just added in the last 24 hours, because as we went through the last couple, we said, geez, this guy's got it. I don't see it here. We need to go back and double check and make sure, because we didn't want to penalize anybody. All right, now we'll talk. Two more of this, because I'm going to lay all of them out.
I got them in order too.
We used to do these kind of things. We used to take them and used to do the 10 years ago. And then survey side, and then planning the outside, the outside. Architects and stuff too.
Dave, can you see those? Okay, I want to kind of walk through and we'll look at some of the differences as we go through here. You should have a copy of all of these plans except an 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 17 in your packets here. And what we have here is Harkins, Gillis, and Lehman. Unfortunately, they're not all in color, but we did the best we can on the blow-up. This is the Harkins here. This is from the water view, looking back, looking from the bay. And what they've got, you've got your open windows down here, your second floor bar, first floor bar, harbor master, storage. I think they have this as an office here. Kind of get an idea of the conception of what they've got there. What they've got is a combination of hardy board and some stone, stone or brick or however you can do it. You can mix that however you want to. This is where they've got the aluminum stainless roof, these lines here, and this area here is their shingled area. Then we go over to Gillis. This was their original. It's a little bit different now. They've got a second floor here where they added the bar upstairs. You saw that number of about 118,000 in there. They can add, if you'd like, stone or other things to the front, but they basically right now their base bid have hardy board all the way down across the front. And this is the Lehman here. The base on it. And this is their view from the back. Again, they've got the stone part similar to what Harkins has in there, and the dormers up and down, and the glass across the back here. And this also gives you an idea of the pull-under canopy in the front. And obviously, you need to look at this a lot more, but on the Lehman there, say, left side rear, that's not the back. They call the front elevation the bay side because that's the view side there. So, this is the front where you pull underneath. This is one side elevation that they have through there. And Harkins, just for might help you a little here. this is a little bit of, that'll help just in general. None of the buildings have been actually situated on the site, but if you look right here, you can see the dark line. That's the outline of the existing yacht club, this dark line that runs around here, okay? It comes right on over close to the pool. And you can see, and all three bidders have taken the building, pushed it forward, turned it so that the views are out through the canal, and that's going to pick up everywhere where you see the yacht club now. Will then, if this new building is built, will be deck of some kind, or pavers, or whatever you decide to put out there. So, with the exception of a little bit where it crosses the corner of this building, all of that area that's yacht club now opens up. You open up the whole back patio on the water side.
That's in the Harkins bid, Ted?
What was?
What you're showing me there, is
Yeah.
that in here?
Yeah,
That's
that
under Harkins.
should be in there too, Dave.
Is that Harkins?
Yes, Harkins.
Well, without my going and finding it, which I can't, but is that the same for all of them?
Similar. I can get you, they're all moved forward and cocked, okay? But I don't have a plan for each one.
Yeah, well,
But the reality
I
is,
haven't seen it all.
yeah, the reality is it can shift, it can turn. A little bit's going to be depend on, we've got some existing wetlands in here that are located in here, so we're shoved over enough. But a little bit of it will be on what happens when we get to the county. So we've got to develop a site plan, stormwater management plan, and a soil and erosion plan that go in, and the county will have a little bit to say about the actual physical location of the building.
Who's going to develop the stormwater management plan?
Contractors.
They are, and that's part of their bid.
That's part of their bid. Confirmed that with all of them this morning.
In the Harkins site plan that we're looking at right now, the existing pool area, bathhouse, and bar
Stay the same.
stay the same. The question that I have is that bar independent of the current yacht club building
Yeah.
for electricity, water services, and things like that?
Which one? I'm sorry, which one are you referring to?
The existing bar that we have right now at the yacht club, does that run on a separate, the outside bar, does that run on
I don't have that answer.
Yeah, because, what I'm looking at here says we're going to leave that alone. which
Yeah,
makes sense.
we have power
But we're
to
gonna have to-
pump room and everything on that side of the structure anyway for the pool.
But the bar has water service.
Yeah,
and
that's a good
Yeah,
question.
so I don't know if
sewer
it's tied
service
to it or
and
not.
things like that.
Yeah.
In all likelihood it is.
Yeah,
Tied to
I
it.
would assume it's tied to the
Yeah.
existing.
So it either has to be routed coming back the other way, or when we negotiate with the contractor, guess what?
That's
We need to
that's
reroute
why
it.
you have a 7%.
Yeah.
Okay. One of them.
No, you have a lot of reasons why you haven't done it.
That's one of the onion deals. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's go inside for a minute. We'll talk about the buildings, a little bit of differences here as we go forward. The first thing is not really noticeable on here, but what we've got is two of the bids, Harkins and Gillett, have what's called a slab on grade, and that's what we're standing on right now. You walk in the building, you're on a concrete slab, okay? That elevation is lower than what the current first floor of the yacht club is now by about 1.5 to 2.5, depending on who's whispered in your ear. And we have some question. The bidders have been to the county, and supposedly they're okay with that because we're technically above the flood level there, but also all of our piping then would be running underground, and we're pretty close in there. And I don't know exactly what happens when you have a flood to a slab or your underground utilities as we go forward. Lehman went ahead and held the same elevation as our yacht club is now out in front. Kept it at that same elevation and kept a crawl space underneath it, primarily so that if we do get a flood, they've got 1.5 to 2 foot before you start damaging the interior of your building or heaving utilities or anything.
Set out in front being the waterfront or the.
No, they're talking about the front entrances that.
The front entrance, the front entrance where you walk in, where you go up 3 steps,
Yeah.
you would be at that same level in Lehman's.
Okay, that.
In the other
Top of the
two,
third step.
at the top of the 3rd step. And the other two, you basically walk on the sidewalk and walk right in. So you lose 2.5 feet of grade.
So they're building a footings, foundation, crawl space,
Crawl
and then
space.
some sort of joist system.
Exactly. They've got a spandex system through there.
Okay.
If we decide, if Lehman is the contractor and we decide, hey, we'd rather have the slab on grade, there are cost savings in there.
How about vice versa?
There are cost expenses to come up, okay? Because they've come up a little bit, you know, I mean, you got.
But it's feasible to do.
Yes, absolutely.
But your first 4 views are enhanced.
By 1.5 feet or 2 foot, yes. I mean, you see, think about when you come out the side door towards the bar that we have right now.
Right.
You're either standing on that level or you're down 1.5 feet or so low. You know, so that's kind of what you got to look at there. You also have to look at that in context with what we talked about real early, which we've got to go back to at some point, and that's what are you going to do with that whole deck area back there? Because how that integrates with the back of these buildings, in my mind, is still something that has to be discussed at some point down the line. So the first thing is you've got 2 that are sitting basically on grade, slab on grade, and 1 that's elevated about 2.5 feet with a crawl space underneath that. Very similar to what we have
Similar to
now.
what we have now.
Yeah. None of the buildings are on piles. Basically, spread footings, concrete cinder block, steel and or wood, depending on where we are. Let me walk through a couple of them here, and Harkins.
Before you
Yeah.
before you do that, and I'm sorry to go back and ask questions like this, but the site plan with the building location where it is was actually part of the original campus plan that was suggested that included moving the pool, connecting Mumford's Landing, and generally building a whole new complex over there. One of the what ifs that's going to come up down the road, we might as well put on the floor right now, is what if we're not going to be able to keep the current yacht club operating while the construction on the new one begins?
Possibly. We have at least 2 of the bidders that are telling us that they will leave. You see the line going
Yeah,
right
I see
there?
one.
They will leave that bar out until the last month or 2 of the job, and then tear the yacht club down and build the outside bar. Now, let me just give you this thing from somebody that deals with the counties on occasion. I would love to see an approved site plan first before we go that direction, because if for some reason this has to shift or move, then once we get into real building, then we got a problem.
Well, the reason I'm asking the question is even more obvious than that. What happens if we simply say, okay, we're going to take down the old building, prep the site, and then work from there? Would this be the most advantageous use of that site? We're creating a tremendous amount of area that we have to pave, deck, or otherwise finish at additional cost, and I don't know what the additional benefit of doing that is.
The thought process is, the thought thinking, and this goes all the way back,
Yeah, I know
is to have more outside deck space on the back side so that you can use, you know, for if you've got a band set up, you're not in a 23-foot wide thing. So the idea of moving the building forward was primarily to pick that up.
Okay.
How that fits, for instance, in this case, you don't have to ever move the pool. Okay?
Right.
You can kind of play around with, and really from my thinking personally, you know, representing only myself, one of the things that you guys have to think about is what happens with all of this area going forward, okay? And that's why we plugged a 17,000 in for the sand, because you don't want to go in and put something in here and then 6 months later say, hey, we haven't thought about how does it tie to Mumford's, how does it tie to the pool, do we want to do anything with the pool or not? To me, that area right in there is almost a separate big thing. What do we want this to look like? Because I'd hate to put, you know, $70,000, $60,000, $50,000, $40,000 in there and then 2 years say, well, you know, we fixed this spot, but we forgot to fix this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for what you're getting at, yeah, we're creating a lot of space. That was the idea, to have more outside space. So,
But the object is really to, given where we are today, I agree with you completely, Ted, that there's a fair bit of thinking that needs to go on about the campus concept there in light of this approach.
Can I,
Which is getting a little bit more real. Okay.
Hopefully,
if I can jump in, we had $600,000 set aside to redo that pool.
I know that.
And I brought it to the board and said, I'd like to wait on that until we get this project underway. So there has been a lot of thought that went into it up to this point. I think you're right, though. Now it's becoming real. But this has been the concept right from the start. And the reason we didn't do anything with this particular side was we have money set aside to do it, but we thought it would be foolish to start anything until we knew what we were going to do with the major component, and that's the yacht club itself. So thought has gone into it. Also, if you notice, the highest use for us, most people during the summer months, or the seasonal months, like to be outside as long as the weather can hold it, out there to where the band is, listening to the music. We went over Wednesday Family Fun Night. It was packed. You couldn't find seating. So we realized that seemed to be the best use. That's where it started, the concept of shifting back and tilting a little bit. Everyone wants to be on the front. If you recall last year, we put the tables outside right on the waterfront. And the first weekend, we had to go back and get more Adirondack chairs. People were complaining there wasn't enough seats, and we still don't have enough. All that led us to make this decision to shift back and turn.
I don't disagree with why the decision was made. I'm just looking at that, which is where your original campus concept was,
right,
to what our site plan is beginning to look like now, which doesn't take into consideration switching the pool yet, and suggesting that I think Ted is really on point with the county and the physically doing this whole project, actually building it. You better start with the site plan approved.
I went, just FYI, I've been to the county, I showed them the site plan.
Yeah.
They all felt it was okay. The wetlands was my concern with the shift, and then
that
the next
site plan is okay, or this one, or both?
Well,
this shifting of the building,
but it's almost identical to that one. We looked at it. I
Yeah.
sat with 5 of the county officials from different departments in the conference room before we even went down this path and said, does this work? We're worried about the wetlands. We're worried about the fuel storage. Are we able to move it? Do we have room? All of them felt, yes, we had the space and room to do this before we went to this, before we brought the design concept to the bidders. I went to the county and laid everything out with them, and they felt it would work the way we were shifting back. Also, the advantage backing up off the water and tilting it was they felt we had enough. We weren't interrupting the impervious surface, so we were going to be okay because this is all paved over on this side. I'm sorry, this side.
I know what's there now. Okay.
So yes, that was thought out.
Thank you.
Two things. Number one, you're not coming to us with any relocation of the pool at this point in time, are you?
No, sir.
Yeah, okay. That's off the table.
we don't even know what happens.
Right.
That's what we're trying
We're
to say.
not considering that at all right now.
All of that has to be thought
Yeah.
and try to do it thinking,
Fine.
what's the future
So
going to look
what
like?
we have in front of us is not the pool. Okay. How much, the second thing is, how far back are we talking? 100 feet, 50 feet from the current location? What is the relocation back from where the current building is at the moment?
Without a scale here, I can't really tell
Just
you.
in round.
1 equals 30 feet, so the back of the, depending on where you are, the back of the building would be about, the new back of the building would be 30 or 40 feet. If you took the corner, that's closest
So it's
to
30 or 40 feet.
the back of it, and then that shoves the front forward too, and the buildings are not exactly the same size or the same shape. That's why, going back to what happened, and let me just recap a little. Before we decided to go out with this, Bob went down and met with Paul Miller and all of the county people, had a meeting with everybody and said, hey, we're looking at this, we're looking at shoving this building forward further away from the water, went through all that stuff. Can we get a site plan? Because one of our big concerns is when you move this building, is anybody going to give you that situation moving further away from the water up in here, how the wetlands are? They gave us every indication that, yes, we were good, but the devil's in the details. That's why one of the important things to come out here in the next week or so is get started on getting a site plan over there, because that could change whether you can leave this open. What happens if the whole building shifts over to where it was before, but forward? That changes all of your thinking about what you do with these decks and what you do out back. So one of the most important things when you make a decision, whichever way it is, whoever it is to get that site plan started and get it into the county and get at least a preliminary approval on the thing, because it's going to answer a whole series of questions, and then it's going to leave the board a whole series of options to discuss discuss, how does this fit in the campus? Do I even want to move that pool depending on where that is? Do I want to have a different path through here? Those, to me, those questions, and that's why I'm really kind of against filling this thing in with, if you want to put sand in there now to get through a year or so till you figure it out, fine. But I'm kind of against trying to put a paver in there or put some kind of Trex decking or something in there, because then you've got all these different, you got concrete, you got lumber, you got Trex, you got a building. So I think from an overall standpoint, Dan, you're right, that needs to be thought about. And you're also correct, what happens when we get to the county? Because no matter what is said, we got to get a drawing.
And if I hear you correctly, then you need to get the county site plan with all the I's dotted and T's crossed officially done sooner than later.
Yeah, once you pick a contractor, and Bob can go through this, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, the idea would be you concurrently moving forward on getting a site plan approved while you're going through the referendum phase.
I think an important thing you just said, select the contractor first, and then you start to nail down all the specifics, right?
But because their work includes
Yeah.
that.
Right, their work includes that. Part of what you're paying them for engineering that we had up there is to do site plan, stormwater management, to go to the county, to come back to us and say,
Design build.
hey,
Well, then there's permitting in the price.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I understand.
yeah. And there's prep of the drawings in the process.
But your answer to my earlier question was it's only 30 or 40 feet. It's not like 100 feet or 200 feet.
It's scaling it at 30 to 40, but let me tell you, it could be however that fits on here. And I think what they've got to do is get that approved, and then everything else leads from that. Am I 30 feet? Am I 40 feet? Do I want a deck that comes out and drops straight down to that lower deck where the boats are? Or do I want to drop there's a 1,000 options later on. But my concern is that we don't try to solve all problems in one fell swoop. We concentrate on either rehabbing a building or building a new building. Before you can answer any of this, you've got to get a site plan approved.
Dave has a question.
Yeah, what is the, looking at the scope of the building, I can't quite tell from here, but what's the distance between the pool and the existing bar in the building
Okay, if this building and the existing bar, okay, if you were standing at the existing building and you walked all the way to the far wall of the yacht club closest to Mumford, that's right there. Okay, right at the beginning of this building. So basically, if you're standing at that corner of the yacht club and you tore it down, you'll be standing there and you'll have nothing but deck or whatever, all the way to the pool, all the way to the water, both directions.
Yeah, that would be quite a bit to get food service with.
If you're running food service from here to here,
Yeah, the kitchen being on the far side of that building too. Not the corner.
the other thing,
Yeah.
you can move it here. Or if you're at Mumford, you might claim that you weren't being fair to them. They'd have to walk us further. So.
Well, I
But for the
mean,
adults there, yes, Dave, it would be an extra X number of feet to go. So think
well,
there's-
it's to go, but the food coming out to the people who are there.
You're talking about servers.
Yeah, food service.
But understand, just because the deck's there doesn't mean you have to necessarily serve all the way out all the time. I mean, we have plans for a grill to do outside cooking. There's a number of things that go with having the space. Right now, we're so cramped in. If you went over Wednesday night, there was no room to move. So expanding the space actually helps us.
Part of what you could do, Dave, and this is operational more than it is me sitting in here, you could use this area down in here for your food service, this area over here for your band, and your pool.
Yeah. Oh,
could
okay.
expand
I haven't seen that drawing, and I haven't found it in the book yet, but
Some-
I would like to get, particularly the siding drawings. If we have a copy that's big enough for us to look at, and
I'll get a copy of that for you. It should be in your book, but I went through, I didn't see it in the one up front. So I'll double check on that.
There's one in
I'm not
there.
gonna look
Rolled
anymore.
up.
Yeah, no, I didn't
I've
see
got
it in the one I had either. So we'll make sure you get a copy of that. But that's been the site plan for since since March.
March.
Yeah, this is what we've had. We've given it out, and it's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no change from what we've been talking about.
So that's 4 months. We've had that for 3-4 months.
well, I haven't. But
Well, yeah, actually, you have. If you look at your other books,
what's the other book?
It's in-
Yeah, so, but I'll get you another copy of it.
If it's there.
The key thing is there's two.
He wants it again.
There's two parts to this. One, where you move the building and getting a site plan. The second is more of an operational part. How are you going to operate? Okay, if we're worried about food service we got food service going to here now. Okay, if we're worried about food service getting to here, then maybe the answer is you put the tables here. So it's more of an operational. How is the best flow here to make that work? You can always flip-flop the kitchen, and I'll show you in a minute why you don't want to do that. But, you know, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. To me, that's why you saw us only put the 17 in there for sand, because, in fact, two of our bidders told us, they said, look, because at one point we had one of the bidders had an outdoor grill thing set up, you know, a separate little thing set up, and they said, look, please, till we get it sited, till we get it built, don't make permanent plans out there, because once you see it, your whole mind may change as to how I want the functioning of that outdoor area to be. How do I want it to tie into the dock? How do I want to make the thing work on a long-term basis?
And that makes sense to you.
It makes sense to me because I don't want to waste money. I don't want to do something out there without knowing what the thing are going to be. Plus, I think that's a decision that's it ties into campus, it ties into where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years here. So, all right, let me run through the buildings. So you've kind of seen the outside, varied outsides. We're going to talk ground level first. This is Harkins is all on one, but ground level for Gillis, ground level for Lehman here. And this is the back facing the water back here. As you can see, they've laid out their first floor kitchen. They've laid everything out in it. Somebody else has laid it differently. Somebody else has laid it differently. That's where the kitchen, the square footage is what we were looking at. Do we have the square footage there? Every one of the bidders have the drains in the floor and have all the electrical we need. They have to coordinate with us. Where do we want it? How do we want it? That's where the kitchen consultant comes in and says, hey, you know, you're showing this. It really needs to be there. So what you've got on the back side is here you've got an enclosed area. These tables are all under the deck. You've got a bar that's right out here on the side. That's closer to the pool, even though it's a ways away. Stairs coming up, and at the entry you come right through the center here, so you can run through the center. They've got some storage down underneath here. In the bathrooms in here, what they've got is access here and access from the outside. We have some concerns. We've addressed them. The bidders have adjusted a little bit. While the bathrooms are to code, there's only, for instance, on one of these bids, there's only 2 urinals in there. And we're talking about taking everybody at the deck, everybody there, and a lot of the people that are at the pool. I mean, already right now the bathrooms we have, while they may meet code, do not meet function, okay? So they've got access from the pool side to get to both of those.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, so. Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
Doesn't matter where you get
I think there
ladies
should be a
room anyway.
line at the men's room.
Well, I'll show you something. I'll show you in the ladies' room here. They've got 4 stalls. Okay? But I'll show you a little better as we go down. Well, we get to half of that. All right, the second one here. Again, this is the water side. First floor outdoor bar. If we go with this contractor, we'll work on being able. This bar right now shows a solid wall in between here. Obviously, we want the bar to be able to feed in here. If we go with this contractor, we've got to talk about this wall coming out so that the bar not only feeds the outside, but also would handle our patrons that are sitting inside. Again, they've got a straight wall right in here. They show an indoor bar here, but that's almost redundant. There's no need for 2 bars from our standpoint. A little bit different. You come down a lobby, take a corner, come out underneath the carport, elevator to the 2nd floor. Their kitchen is, when you take out the kitchen managers, a little bit smaller than the other ones because they've got a server station. They kind of did it a little bit differently in here. Again, when we choose a contractor and we sit down and talk to a consultant, we'll go from there. They've got storage, mechanical. restrooms, men's restroom here with, on one of their things coming back to us, they've added to that. Still, we think it's probably a little too small. Again, you can access it from the pool side by coming down a hallway without having to walk through the middle of the dining area here. Third one. Third one, Lehman here, did it a little bit differently. They come down through the middle, and they've got the 3 or 4 steps here. Again, the reason the steps are there is because they're up 3 or 4 steps above. And they got double steps going upstairs and an elevator to get to the second floor. Walk straight through into your indoor dining. They did their clothes off a little bit different. They came in and kind of went like this on their area for closed in and picked up underneath the building, underneath the second floor. This kind of goes back to a little bit more of the original concept where you had indoor-outdoor, but you were undercover, okay? So now you have both on this one. Outside bar here, which we would have to talk to them about to tie into the permanent building somehow, because this while it's covered, it's still outside. Again, here, they've gone to 4 urinals instead of 2, so they've been a little more in for stalls for the ladies' room from 4 to 6. So we're trying to cut your line. But again, you've got a corridor here that separates everybody from the eating thing. So you won't have people in bathing suits going right through the middle of your thing. They can access this, and the people here can access this. Kitchen square footage is plus or minus what we've got on a couple of the others. So that's what we stand here. Again, you can see they just did a kind of a layout in here. But again, until we get the consultant in, that doesn't mean anything. So that's what we have on the first floor of these 3. A little bit different on each of them. Some of it's personal preference. Some of it's looking at how you like the entryway coming straight down versus going around, the stairways on each side, going to the second floor. Walk up to the second floor. Second floor upstairs, elevator comes out upstairs. Here it's a single stairwell that comes up, goes down the middle, enters the large room. This is Harkins. They have a vaulted ceiling, so the ceiling in the middle of the room is at 20 feet plus or minus. So you are not at, say, 12 feet or 11 feet or whatever we are here, but they've got a higher ceiling, more open feel of a banquet hall here. Although both they and Lehman have that, and Gillis said that they could look at that and do that once they did some mechanical layout to make sure the mechanical worked on it. But right now they have a 12-foot, I don't know what this room is, but they have a 12-foot ceiling height across the entire room. Upstairs they've got the bigger kitchen, and you have to kind of ignore all of how they've laid it out, but they've got the bigger kitchen that includes the prep. They've got the service elevator that runs down to the first floor kitchen, so none of the food goes down any of the main elevators, but they can feed up and down there. Come down, you've got a groom's room and a bride's room for changing, or for if you're having any other thing there that you need a couple of changing rooms in here. You've got the bathrooms in here. Outside bar on the second floor, outside seating on the deck. Over here, they've got this as being a business office here. On the second floor, this would be right above where the harbor master is on the first floor. That kind of lays them out a little bit there as far as that goes. Here with Gillis, they have similar coming up the stairs, come up and around to the second floor, the elevator, go down the hallway, you enter this. They've got a second floor bar here. We probably talked to them about doing something with this wall so it wasn't a single door going in there, but more open to tie in here. They have a deck here, which could easily be turned into an office area if we needed to. They've got an inside partial bar. Their second floor kitchen is not where we would need it to be based on all of the feedback we've got. It's too small, okay, if this is going to be your main front kitchen. So we have to talk to them about doing some changes up in here. So take a look at the size of the kitchen here and the size of the kitchen here versus the size here, which it really is that. It's quite a bit different. If you can do all your prep and all your major stuff and you're going to serve 200 people, be able to serve 200 plus people, your biggest kitchen needs to be upstairs. And so, similar to what we have now. Come out, you've got restrooms, men's, ladies' room, a bridal suite, a groom suite, second floor bar, as I said, and the deck there. This is right currently has a 12-foot ceiling, but they could talk about going up once they run the mechanicals. Last one is Lehman, second floor bar here. We have to talk to them a little bit because that's more of an outdoor bar than an indoor-outdoor bar. So we have to talk about doing something right here to connect it. They've got the deck here, the seating here. They have outdoor here, but that could be converted again to an office if you needed it. Storage in here, the full kitchen in here. You'll note they put their service elevator in the middle of the room. And we've talked to the other bidders about that because when the slopes of the roof are such, if you start to get your service elevators out towards the exterior of the building, you've got to worry about whether you've got enough room because the roof is going like this and the elevators have to go higher than the floor that they're going to. So on our original concept drawings, we showed an elevator in the corner. When they did their design, they said the elevator would go right through the roof, so they moved it to a better spot on there, going there. On this one, you come up 2 sets of stairs, feed right through the middle here, elevators up here, electrical room up here, much larger bathrooms up in here, storage for tables and whatever else we need, decking and decking on this side. Now there are some differences when you look at these things which constitute some of the difference in bid. You'll see that here the decking runs on the outside, both sides. On here, there's no decking running down this side. Okay, on here it's a very small deck versus that. Here, you go about 2/3 of the way they do here. So there's some differences in here as you go through that you've got to look at a little bit closer and study a little bit closer, and we've gone through that. No matter which contractor you decide on that we're going to go ahead and go forward and work with, we've got some work to do with them, okay? Because none of these plans are perfect, okay? There's nuances within all of them that once you say, hey, this is the person we feel comfortable with, we're going to have to sit down and say, look, we're great, but we can do this. I will tell you all 3 bidders have ideas. You know, they want to talk about how we do finishes. They want to talk about a whole lot of other stuff. So I think they are all very anxious. I had good conversations with all of them, and you know, that's kind of where we are. And I know you can't tell anything from this until you have the drawings and you look at it a few times. You probably still have 8 zillion questions, but that kind of gives you the 3 primary bidders we felt were in the ballpark of being it 3 guys that we felt could do the job, and it depends on what you want and where we are.
Ed, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for your valuable time that you volunteered in the past, in the present, hopefully in the future.
Hopefully we're getting a get out of jail card.
But thank you. Appreciate it.
So, Bob, you want to take this back over? This is yours.
All right, so and these will be available for everybody to look at. You have all these in your booklet with the exception of that layout, which we'll get for you. I've looked at 3 now, and I don't see them in any of them. We were blowing them up so we could have for the meeting. I think we just missed putting it together. We'll have these out for everybody to look at. So, moving forward, after we reviewed everything, we looked at it, we were trying to come up with the right option. We feel rehab versus rebuild, and when we looked at the numbers and everything's in your book to consider, we think going with the new building makes more sense. When you look at the cost breakdown, the best rehab contract we thought we had came from Lehman. They had the most detail. When you start looking at everything added onto it, it's just you're rehabbing an existing facility, and you have to think about what makes more sense for future use. Part of what you were saying, Dan, what's our longer range? And that's where we felt the shift of the building, the turn back. After speaking with the contractors through the process, they all felt that was good, that would work for us. So we're recommending new construction versus rehab. I probably shouldn't surprise anybody with what we've presented today, but all the materials are in your book. Next thing
and Ted was talking about some of the nuances, that took a little while to go through and try to figure out where the difference is. We feel very, very confident we're down to 3 very good contractors. 2 are more local, 1 is in Pennsylvania. All 3, we've had experience with Harkins as an example, with our pool around Swimmer Racket. They did the pool area there for us. Lehman's done the property here. Gillis Gilkerson's a big contractor in Salisbury, does a lot of work, and they have a great reputation. So we're comfortable with the 3 of them that we feel new is the right answer and moving forward with any one of those 3. We've made a decision to make a recommendation to you, and it's based on all the nuances that we saw in there and trying to break down actual numbers to numbers. This would be the order that we would recommend the contractors. Lehman being the first. We felt through the scope of the work they offered the most product for the amount of money. And then Harkins was the most expensive, and I think part of what we liked was all the gingerbread, all the bells and whistles that came with it. Of course, you're always going to like everything that goes with that. And then Gillis Gilkerson had a good bid. The concern we had there, and I had a lot when I was looking at all of them without the extensive construction background that Ted had, when you're trying to compare real apples to apples and look at everything that was put into it, some of the things were a little, they weren't as defined for me. So trying to get apples to apples, and that was a little bit of a concern when you're talking about bringing to you and then ultimately to the community. We've asked them to come with their best bid. I feel, and Ted had felt, Joe had felt when we're all looking at it, that Lehman brought their best bid for the price and for what they were including in their initial package. Again, it's going to be up to you all to direct us. You may say, no, use one of the 2 local ones. I think we can work with any of the 3. I think any 3 are going to be, it's going to work out for us moving forward. There are some, again, nuances. I want to show you the next steps. A timeline. Everybody's asking to update timelines. You're going to have, I'm going to give you actually another handout. I didn't want to put it in the book and someone say they would not, there's so much in that book. I wanted to make sure you guys had these. You're going to notice, and Tom, I apologize, you're not in a position to see the colored timeline right now. Okay, this is what I'm going to call out of the gate the referendum timeline.
I can see that, Bob.
Okay, all right. What I just handed out actually gives a little more explanation of what these are. You'll notice in the one I handed out is color-coded with blue because I'm going to overlay it. My next slide will show you the blue as well. This is what I'm asking is next Tuesday. I'd like you all to take this, review your materials, questions over the weekend. Give me a call. Ted and I are both available. Ted's down all weekend. We'll answer any questions we have about any of the materials. We'll get back to any of the board members in detail with anything. 3 of you came in yesterday and preliminary looked through all the packages. That's where some of the good information came out, so we appreciate that. Our goal is by Tuesday for the board to get back together and say, yes, we agree on X contract, whomever it may be. The board's going to give us guidance on that. Because if we're able to move forward with that, okay, we can meet the timeline that we've been, the same timeline. I went back and checked and actually had Teresa pull all our other reports. We're within 2 weeks of our original timeline on everything we've done. Then it would take us, what we need to do, we're required to send out a public hearing notice before we go to referendum. We need 2 weeks to do that. So what I'd like to do is target July 14th for the referendum notice. We've already created one. The information I handed you a moment ago has it, the verbiage on the top in the italics. This is actually what the notification would look like. It's for those who have been here a while, it's exactly the type of notifications we've sent out in the past. But we went ahead and had one mocked up so you can see this is the front and back. Tom, I don't know where you are camera-wise. Just not showing you.
Keep going, that's fine.
right? This is what it would look like. But basically, all it is an announcement of an upcoming meeting where we have to lay out what our project is and what we're taking to referendum. We need to get agreement that the public hearing is reasonable as our step, because there's a timeline that we have to do internally to get these documents created to the printer and ready to go out. So it's our intent, as we go through this, for you all to consider saying, yes, that makes sense for us, because we'll move forward at least with the printer on these, because we need 4 to 5 days for the printer to do their job. Next week, we're going to ask for a builder on next Tuesday. We'll mail the public hearing notice out. All it says is, here's our notice, here's when we're planning to meet. The public hearing will be in the mid-July. Now, I'm going to draw your attention back to the blue, but I'll do it with another slide because it'll be a little more helpful. 16 July eligibility deadline. This is basically who are we mailing the ballots out to? And again, these are tying in. Please understand that these aren't steps I'll be taking. This will be done by the elections committee. They actually handle this process. Finalize the ballot materials. Notice the date is after the hearing. The reason that's important, we need to get feedback from you, from our membership, and when we do the public hearing notice, there may be some things that come up that we need to tweak before we finalize the materials. We mail out the information on August 1st, the ballot, due back on August 29th. August 30th is when they'd be counted. I worked the timeline out with the elections committee chair, Ms. Butler. All right, I'm going to give you a quick overlay of some other components that have to be had. That's sort of the timeline. I'll give you a little bit of the project timeline. The other things that will happen concurrently are going through concurrently. And please understand, all this will be available on the website following our meeting, so everyone can see this. 29 June, assuming we get a go-ahead Tuesday with a selection of a contractor, we're going to immediately make a call, let them know, and we're setting up time to meet with them. We must immediately begin reaching out to whichever kitchen contractor they like to work with, because we pretty much know what the layout is. We need to start getting that design put together. Special board meeting, I'm recommending we do that. It's just a follow-up. We just bring in a half hour, just an update exactly where we are. I don't want to go to a public meeting without at least giving you all a cursory review of here's our update, here's the status. July 16th, we're going to modify after the public hearing on the 14th. We go back to any modifications we need to make. July 17th, this is where the concurrent action, assuming we get a good plan put together, when we get to go ahead on the 26th, we'll immediately contact the contractor. They start doing the site planning, so we can get that to the permitting to the county, which is critical moving forward. You do that simultaneously. Anyone have a question about this timeline that I've shared? I know I've given it to you in 2 slides, but I did do a handout, a written format as well. I want to make sure there was no confusion on it. Yes, sir.
And Bob, obviously this then ties in with the construction schedule.
Yeah, the blue actually ties more towards there are other things happening, but I hit kind of the project with bullets. Ted?
Yeah, let me just expand a little bit on this here. You got 2 things going. You got what the board has to do to be able to move a referendum forward, and then second, you've got what we have to do to get the board a number on July 10th, and that is the go to public hearing number. Okay. In other words, we've got prices. We can build what we've got on the drawings right now, but we really need to go back and tighten up these areas and find out. The idea here would be that you would select a contractor, that we would enter into what we would call a Phase A contract, which is for the engineering design only, okay? At that point, we sit down with them, we meet with them, we hammer out any of the questions here, we tighten up all of the numbers, and then at that point, we're ready to come back to the board on July 10th, having had the kitchen consultant in, laying out what we've got, with a final number that comes back to you guys. At the same time, you have authorize them by going with this Phase A contract to start the engineering and design of this building. Now, there is an at-risk number, okay? Just as there was on this building when we bid this building. When we bid this building, the board approved, at that time, the contractor for this building, $60,000 to proceed with design. If the referendum fails, you eat it, okay? You have a design of a building, but you eat it. You're not proceeding with the building. So that's your upfront, move this process forward, get your site plan going. One of the things you got to look at when you look through at that breakdown sheet is what that cost is, okay? So right now, with Gillis, you've got $140,000. With Lehman, you've got $60,000. And with Harkins, you've got $172,000. So just from a risk analysis, when you're looking at the whole thing, remember, if you commit to going forward with drawings, these guys, I've talked to Gillis, I've talked to Harkins, I've talked to Lehman. They would intend, once we completed any and all scope issues that we need to talk about and tie together, their idea is to get a site plan done, to get it into the county, to get it approved, and to proceed with construction drawings. So that if a referendum goes forward, they will enter into a Phase B. And what we did on this building, for instance, we entered into a Phase A, went through all of that stuff. When the referendum passed, we entered into a Phase B, which was the actual construction. Okay, so one of the things you want to think about when you look through here is there is a modicum of risk out here when you go Phase A and B, but you really need to do that in order to get us moving forward here, to get something on there and to know that we can put the building. And so the question becomes, where do you want to go? How do you want to go with it? So just when you're looking at that sheet of paper that has the breakout on design down here at the bottom, just take a look at that, because that top line is your at-risk number if you go A-B. So as long as, I just want to make sure that, so while you're going through it, we're going through all this stuff, bam, we're going through getting construction documents started, getting stuff to the county, starting to talk about what can and can't do.
Just for the record, we're already at risk of dollars that we've already spent. So, this is an additional amount. But the differentiation between the contracts you explained before Lehman is because they do it in-house, right? That's why it's much less. We've already spent money.
Billions of dollars you spent on DP alone.
And please understand, part of the analysis when to get to our recommendation with Lehman was exactly, that was a big consideration, was the fact, if you look at that number, that outlay up front, whether the referendum goes or not, because again, I think we have three very good contractors here. When I boiled it down, the in-house made a difference to us because that's a risk, and it's more than half of which, or less than half of which, the risk with the other contract, only because they're going outside to do the work. I understand the reasoning, but that was a important factor we considered. Yes. Yes, sir.
Bob, I have a question that really has something to do with the construction that we've been talking about, hearing about, but I think ties into this. A few of those board members, before we really get into it or feel comfortable, I think need to see a business plan. And you and Dave McLaughlin, I assume, have been working on one. Can you give us a time frame when we can expect to see a business plan?
I can. Towards the end of next week, that'll be complete. We're at the construction portion is what we're presenting today with the bids. We're just about finished with the business plan, which will be accompanied. I think we're going to need that when we roll it out to the public. I'm trying to get it to you all by the end of next week so you have time to review it before we take it to the public, public being our membership, to discuss at the public hearing.
Thank you.
Bill, that's a really good question, because we've said all along we need a business plan to support
Almost
it.
finished.
We'll have it. Okay. Good.
I got one for you.
Okay.
On my watch, it is 3 minutes after 5 o'clock on Friday, June the 22nd. I don't know about you, but I already have plans for Saturday the 23rd, Sunday the 24th, and my birthday on Monday the 25th.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
So to have a special meeting on the 26th and expect me to decide on not only the vendor, but the design and the layout and the site prep that's taken a year and a half to get to is a little aggressive.
Well, here,
I'd like to see your timeline move back about 2 weeks, so I've got time to really think about this and look at it and study it.
I got it. Here, let me challenge you with this, okay? It's going to be a board decision, okay? Obviously, I don't make this call. I'm telling you the timeline, what we can deliver on. The site plan should not be, please understand, I'm not pushing you back. Site plan's been out. We have rolled this out for 3 or 4 months site plan. I'm actually a little surprised. You're surprised by it because you've seen it. It's been hanging in my office. That's the bigger concern, and I understand with the builder, trying to delve down into that. That's what you tasked us to do and bring it to. My bigger concern is delivering on the time frame that I promised I would, which we're trying hard to meet that. It's up to you guys to make the decision. If you tell me to wait a month, I'm waiting a month. I mean, part of our delay was January, February, when we were ready to go then to this level. So it's up to you all.
I applaud your ability to have delivered the timeline that you said you were going to deliver. Okay, you've really done a great job. The whole team has done an outstanding job on all of this. I have no hassles with that. I'm just telling you that as one board member, I got a serious problem with coming back with a major decision after reviewing a major amount of information over a weekend that I have other plans for.
Dave had a question.
I agree with Dan. I'd use stronger language than that, but I won't. It's not just mildly aggressive. It's ridiculous.
Excuse me.
I believe.
I'll say it's just mildly. It's more than mildly aggressive. It's not reasonable. It's not reasonable to do this on that timeline for next Tuesday. And I don't agree with it. I'm sure others may, but.
Well, count me as one who agrees with it. Surprise, surprise. I was appointed to the 10-year plan task force, 3.5 years ago, Ted? Yep. This has been a very, very long process, and I'm pleased that we're finally here. And it's a little scary because we're going to have to make some decisions, but that's the way it goes. What we are being asked to do on the 26th is to give green light to selection of a contract and proceeding with that, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you've laid out the three, and we can ponder what's in our books. And we're not being asked to go through a detailed review of these construction plans. We're being asked to evaluate the 3 alternative bids. You've made a recommendation of ordering 1, 2, and 3. And you pointed out here just a moment ago, you and Ted, certainly the at-risk amount being part of the consideration of that. So in any event, we are being asked to review what we've got and either agree with the recommendation or alternatively provide a different choice. You're saying you're satisfied with working with all 3 of them, but there are advantages and disadvantages to each. So that's the decision I see us having to make. And I see nothing outrageous about asking us to do that in terms of Tuesday. And I'll stop.
Mr. Donsack and I never disagree. But Pete, I'm going to read you from this piece of paper that Bob just gave us. June 26th, special board meeting, 9 a.m. Board approves selection of contractor, base concept of structure, and design phase of contract, committing to funds to complete construction drawings, plans and specs, elevations, etc. Board agreement to mail out public notice. We're not just picking a contractor here. You're saying on a project where the board has never voted on the design concept, that in the next 4 days, we're going to vote on it and say it's okay or it's done and over with. We're going to vote on what the buildings are being built out of without getting full description. And I haven't been through this book, and neither have you. Neither one of us know what they're being built of. Neither one of us really have seen detailed elevations or anything else. We've seen concepts. No, Pete, that's asking, you're stepping right into a bucket that I don't think you really want to step into that quickly. I think we need some time to just make sure that we've got P's and Q's together here. Okay? Thank you.
Ray's next. You're next there, Bill.
Yeah.
My birthday's Monday too, there, Uncle Dan, and I promise
promise I will not have enough libation Sunday night to make it difficult to talk about on Monday morning. We have several concepts and ideas along here. It's been an awful lot of time. As far as I'm concerned, I've already made a decision in my own mind based on what I've seen here today with the information that we had. But that's just me, you know. I'm going to go over it some more so I can make sure that I'm, you know, I understand what decision that I would make. But I don't feel that the timeline that you've given us is totally unreasonable based on the fact that I'll have a little more time to go through it.
Okay, so we have a couple board members that need more time. We have a couple board members that are okay with the time. So let's find the middle. What would we like to do? Dan says he needs 2 weeks. Pete says he doesn't need any more time, nor does Ray. Where's the middle?
Compromise at 7 days. Give me
Dan will compromise at 7 days.
I need to respond. Okay, I hear your question. Bob and Ted, what I think we have here is a rather critical time frame in order to accomplish what we need to accomplish, right? In other words, pushing it back as a compromise a week, what are the consequences of that in terms of the overall objective and the time frame? So that's a question I'd like you to answer. But before you do, I'd like to respond to Dan, with whom we very rarely disagree. We have had this concept plan going back to what, December, Bob Thompson?
Sure.
The concept plan was vetted 3, 4, 5 months ago, if I'm not mistaken. Each board member had an opportunity, as did the public, to review those basic concept plans. And in fact, I authored a written critique of it myself. You had 3 sessions with the public, and there were changes to that concept plan based on the input. Okay. So the concept plan, we can't pretend is new. It is not new. It's been subject to at least 4 or 5 months of opportunity to review, and in fact, it has changed to reflect input from both the community and from the board, and your own thinking, I believe. We're not being asked to get involved in the details of what construction materials and what elevation and how many steps and what bar equipment. I don't think that's my role as a board member, to get involved in those details. The 10-year plan task force previously, which preceded Bob's planning group here for this effort, is that group that's been charged with the details. But the concept plan, which is the important thing that we have to sign off on, Dan, the concept plan, and that's not a new plan. It's been revised, and we've seen here another iteration of it. We just have to select a contractor, and then as Ted Maroney said very, very well, then you really, once you've selected that contractor, have a lot of things to do to sort that out and then come back to us, correct? I believe that's what you said.
No matter who you pick.
Yes. So we will have yet another opportunity after we've identified and selected the contractor to do more fine tuning. Is that correct?
Yeah, there has to be.
Yeah, there has to be, sure. But we need to select that contractor on the basis of what we know at the moment, the competitive bids. And I don't think, again, I'll say it, that's unreasonable in light of what we're faced with to do by Tuesday. I hear your compromise suggestion, but I'm concerned about, and now that I've had a chance to pose the question, what are the consequences of putting them back a week? One of you two, what are the consequences? We've got a rather detailed timeline here. Any alteration in one step of it affects the others.
So what if the entire thing is affected? Are you
To
kidding
be
me?
honest with you, if in 1 week, this board can promise to come back here and not delay this anymore, if adding a week in here allows this board to go through, look at this stuff, and come back to this community and get off the stick and say we want a rehab or we want this contractor to go forward and move, a week is not the end of the world. My idea is I'd like the 7 members of this board to say, I've looked through it, I feel comfortable, I'm good with it, I hate this, I hate that, and then tell the general manager, this is your mission, drive on. And would I like to have it next Tuesday? Yeah, but I've also, at the same time, Pete, I've been through this for 5 years now, it seems like. So I know that
We have a difficult time making decisions.
But that's what I'm saying, is if everybody is good with 1 week, if everybody is good with a compromise of 1 week, in the meantime, phone, communicate back and forth and say, hey, when you go back and talk to these guys, then the idea is, between the time you say, okay, and originally July 10th, but let's kick that back 7 days, we go and we clean up a lot of this stuff, and we come back to you on July 10th and say, hey, Bill Wentworth didn't like this, we fixed it. This is, here's why we're doing it. Then everybody feels we're on the same page going forward. And I would rather have 4, 5, 6, 7 members say, yes, I have the time in 1 week. We're under kind of this mental pressure thing that we've been under for a year. Get going, get going, get going. So from our end is, what can we provide on our side? The opposite side is, what do you guys feel comfortable with? So I'm good with a week if you're asking me that. I think
A week from today would be fine.
A week from the 26th.
No, a week from today.
Wait,
You guys make the decision. You're asking me what a week is. Fine for me.
Tom, you have a.
Tom gets to say when the meeting is.
Yeah, I thought I might add my thoughts on here, if nobody minds.
He's the president.
I think we have had a presentation here of a well thought out, obviously well worked process. The big key now, as I understand it, is to select the builder with the assumption that we accept the team's proposal that we build as opposed to remodel. I do not disagree that a little more time for folks to have, as opposed to a weekend, to go through the materials. But I also agree that we have had this concept in place and it hasn't moved much at all except to enclose the downstairs, which was the human cry from the community, was to enclose the downstairs. So I would simply like to propose that we reconvene a week from today, with the understanding, as I understand the process, is that we would just make a decision on who the builder might be, assuming we take the proposal. And at that point, my understanding is that we work with that builder. This team's already vetted the designs, the one they're proposing, but they've also said 2 or 3 times in this session that there are some opportunities to take ideas from one builder to another. Once you've decided which builder you're going to work with, based on cost, design they are beginning with. So as long as we've got the opportunity to sit down with your builder once they're selected and say, you're such and such % there on what the design's going to be, but here are some other ideas we've got, other input we've had. My voice says we reconvene a week from now in order to make the decision. I think that if we could change the concept design, numerous times over the months, I think that might be different. But I think a week is enough time. From my one voice, I think a week is enough time.
Thank you, Tom. Dave?
Go ahead. I'm not going to comment on it.
Comment?
Yeah, excuse me.
Yeah, I think, can we as a group agree that if we get together on Friday the 29th or Saturday the 30th, that we will have enough information in our own minds to go ahead and make a decision on this thing?
At 3 p.m. Friday the 29th and just be done with it 1 week from now.
Yeah. Dan is okay with next Friday. I'm okay with next Friday. Tom, your suggestion for next Friday?
Yeah, next Friday, whenever. I mean, ultimately, other people are going to decide about this. But I do have to say that we have no stick to get off of. We have not delayed anything as a board, nothing. In the last year, we have been waiting patiently. We have never, as a board, never sat down as a board and discussed the design concept. Not once. Individuals may have put in, we've heard, we've gone, many of us have gone to many of the public meetings. We've seen what bars put up. It used to be outdoors, now it's indoors. There's upstairs bars, different bars. I mean, Ted, we haven't delayed a thing.
Okay, would you agree,
Okay.
Dave, that you have everything you need now to make a decision on the 20th?
Okay, I do have some questions. I'm probably going to have more questions as I read those. I'm not quite sure I'm going to get that information. I mean, one question that I would have, I mean, I know you flashed it up there, so it must be right, but why are we selecting a contractor that is costing us $500,000 more? Now, I know the risk factor is $80,000 more, but you know, over $500,000 is over $500,000.
That's why you need a
And yet we have confidence in all three of these contractors, and we're repeating what Bob's told us. All three of these contractors are fully capable of giving us what we need.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, at this point in time, may we have a motion if we're planning on changing this date as the date?
Mr. Presiding Officer, that is the privilege of the president to call a special meeting, and he's on the phone, he can do that.
Okay,
We have consensus.
Tom, wait, first of all, do we have a consensus that we can meet next Friday? or what?
Yes.
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 Yes, we have that consensus. Tom, would you like to, Tom, would you do that for us, please?
I hereby call a special meeting a week from now, starting at 3 o'clock in the same building. It's the same room, if it's available, for us to reconvene to discuss further. And that's, yes, I'm done. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Well
we-
said, Tom, well said.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
Let me add something else. It's kind of like off the cuff announcing a meeting. I do think, and I want to, with everybody, some enthusiasm around asking questions just like the ones that they just asked. You know, let's not wait until next Friday to ask that question of Bob and the team. You know, I don't want to get into it right now necessarily at this point, but I do think this is the period of time for us to look at all this information. I haven't had a chance to read it all either. But I just want to thank Ted personally, as I know Bill did already, and Bob. Again, you've killed a lot of trees, presenting an awful lot of information that's been vetted very well as far as I'm concerned. So thank you guys for your job and your work. Thank you.
Okay. You want to take any questions? or-
I'll answer, sure.
Okay.
The board, I mean, do you want to do it at your meeting, or you guys?
You gotta
Yeah,
do the public.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Okay.
It's on the agenda.
Okay, at this time, we'll entertain questions from the public. Please stand, give your name and your address.
Sandy Reese, 94 Helm Court.
We don't need it. Speak up, Sandy.
I'm just have a question about the downstairs bar. There's not going to be an inside bar and an outside bar?
There is going to be an inside and outside bar.
Down there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Looks like they're going to have the outside bar serving people inside.
The concept shows the bar on the corner. We're not taking the bar that's out near, the one that's outside now. Our
It's
vision
gonna be
is
there.
will stay there.
Right.
The one on the corner of the building will serve both sides, inside and out. We're looking at a closure.
Okay.
because
So in the wintertime, that would
Yes.
be the bar of choice?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, got it.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Yeah.
Any other
The bar
questions?
of choice.
To her husband, the bar is really important.
Okay. Any other questions?
Over here, Joe.
Public? Yes. Joe, go around.
Joe Reynolds, 84 Watertown Road. Dave brought up the difference in the prices, but the recommended price, assuming the board would go for it, we're essentially looking at $4 million. This was proposed to the association members over a period of 3 or 4 different public hearings to cost $2.5 million. For those of you who have been around here any length of time, Dan Sikorsky can probably recognize this, and I think this is one of the reasons he wants to be super cautious, is that what the board is being asked to do, as I see it, is to select a contractor. Let's assume they select Lehman. Starts out at roughly $4 million. And we're going to give him a go-ahead to start spending money. shades of the failed original community center. So before we even go to referendum, we're going to say, let's start doing these drawings and get all these permits and do whatever the spending is. It's 50,000, 80,000. I mean, the last go round, you know, it ended up in hundreds of thousands of dollars of money that was spent, and the associate, we ended up not building it. How many people on this board, if you choose to raise your hand, think a referendum will pass at $4 million? Would anybody raise their hand and say, yes, I believe a referendum will pass at $4 million?
Not going to respond to that.
That's not an appropriate question.
I think it's a very appropriate question because you have to ask yourselves that question. Now, whether you want to share or not share that you with the membership who elected you, that's your decision, certainly, because it appears that none of you want to share it.
Point of order. Joe,
Public
comment.
comments.
You have the ability to make comments.
I am making comments.
Excuse me. I didn't interrupt you while you were talking. Give me the same courtesy. Okay? You have the right to make comments. You do not have the right to question board members. The board members will make that decision before we get, if we think we can do that referendum.
In my comments, I can ask or say whatever I want as long as it's not objectionable. I insist that you don't have the right to tell me that I can't get up here and voice a question. Whether you want to answer or not is up to you. Jeez. Bob mentioned that the decking for the pool area had been in the budget at $600,000. Is that correct, Bob? Roughly, give or take.
Yes, sir.
And I believe that was for replacing the wood decking all around the existing.
Not the decking.
No, it's not the decking.
The pump house
Yeah, it's not the
and
decking.
the surround,
It's a lot more.
that's what we had said in the back.
Pump house and decking, give or take.
Okay.
We're talking $600,000, whatever. Put $100,000 in a pump house. And yet, all this new decking or whatever around this new building that we're going to sort of leave out there in limbo, putting in an amount of $85,000 for. I would suggest that the board look closely at ancillary costs that we haven't really considered. I don't know, either the $600,000 number for the pool was way off, or the cost to put a new deck, which is bigger than the pool area, fair amount, for $85,000. I think the board needs to look at that. I was wondering too, and the board is looking at these things. I didn't hear any mention of furniture. I don't know if we're going to put new furniture in this place. I'd ask the board to look closely at what the entrance of this place is going to look like from the parking lot side. The waterfront side, based on the drawings, looks fairly good. From the parking lot side, which is everybody can see when they pull up, in many cases is a little bland. I'm wondering if the deck level of the New Yacht Club, the deck around the New Yacht Club, is going to be level with the deck level of the existing bar at the pool now. I think that should be a consideration. Bob mentioned plan for a grill. Somebody mentioned where we want to be in 5 or 10 years. I think that's what we ought to be looking at right now. I think what we're about is where we want this to be in 5 or 10 years. We don't want to build something and then be looking at having to spend more money just 5 years down the road on this yacht club. This yacht club, we do it. And believe me, I support this notion. I'd spend $6 million over there. But I want to see it done right, and I want it seen it done in a transparent way with a referendum that goes out that's totally honest with association members. And I don't know that we're in any rush. I understand, Pete, I understand your concern about getting moved quickly. This thing's been going on for years. I mean, to suddenly say, I agree. Dan Sikorsky and I, we either disagree vehemently or we agree vehemently on issues. On this one, I agree with you. there's no rush on this. And it shouldn't be delayed. And I think a week's reasonable, but even if it was 2 weeks or whatever, you settled that. This is an important issue for this community. And, I mean, I follow all this stuff fairly closely, as you all know. I hope the board can come together and get this out as soon as possible. I'm worried about the idea of spending money prior to going to referendum. And I'll tell you one reason. For someone who, given after see the whole picture, who wants to see something new over there, I'm worried that you can taint the voting pool by going out and saying you're going to put money at risk for a new building before you have approval to build it. And I think that should be an important consideration for you all for getting a referendum passed. So there are a lot of aspects to think, but anyway, thank you for allowing me all the time.
Any other comments?
I'd like to, because this was for us to respond, at least from our perspective.
Okay.
I don't want to have it open-ended.
Okay.
A couple of things, just so we're clear. We're not misleading, nor have we ever misled anybody through the process. And transparency is where we are. Mr. Reynolds says $2.5 million, and now somewhere at $3 million. We deceitful. We haven't. If you recall, and that's why we videotape, that's why it's available, okay? It's a misleading statement. I don't think he intentionally did it, but we're not telling you something wrong. We said it did not include. We had a change. We enclosed the first floor. There's significant cost with enclosing the first floor. We said it never included the decking work outside, okay? We said that up front. We said it would not include the demo cost. We had to get those additional costs. Now that we've tightened those up, these are where the numbers are coming in. We said that up front. We said it did not include these. We did not know what they were. And we're going to make sure we get those. Now we're putting them out there. One thing we're not going to do is hide any of our numbers. It's very important that everyone knows exactly what we're doing. So at our initial swag, when we said here's what it was going to be, we are following exactly what we said we would do, and this is the very next step to tighten those numbers up. So please, I'm not trying to mislead in any way. Mr. Reynolds, I did not interrupt you once. Okay? So I just want to be clear on that. Secondly, if we're looking at, and Ted, you're welcome to chime in on this, we need to spend a few dollars up front. Please, I'm not making light of $60,000 at all. It's association money. Part of our decision of making the recommendation we did was because it was the most economical that we could go to get the blueprints, the drawings, the right information, so it's more than just here's what we think it is. It's tightened up and it's a real presentation with real numbers down to the T that we can give to the membership because they deserve that. We can't get that for free. We've hundreds of hours this man's contributed to the community. I hate to find out what he gets paid an hour for his regular job. We relied on, that wasn't disrespectful, Ted. I'm saying I appreciate your time and effort. A lot of energy is going in to get it to this point. We need to spend a little money to get the drawings to get to the next level. So please, we're not trying to waste anybody's money at all or hiding anything.
Let me talk about spending the money up front. You had two choices. You could go out and hire an architect and an engineer and design a plan to come up with bids that you would have spent that money up front, similar to what we did before. We went that route once before and then got it approved, but we weren't 100% done and everything got out of control a little bit for us. Or you can go ahead and get us to where we're at now and spend the money. And it's no different than what we did on this very building. When we went into a Phase A contract on this building, we spent $60,000 to design this building pre-referendum. Because we had the design, we had the total cost before we ever got there. And that's the same thing, depending on which way you go, that you'd be talking about here. You'll have the design, you'll know your total cost before, and then you have to make a decision. Do I feel, to go back to one of Joe's original questions, do I feel confident we can get a referendum through based on that? But, and things can change going forward. If you don't get the site plan approved, you can go to all the referendum you want, and you can get an approved referendum, and then come back and say, we don't even have a site plan that works here. The other thing you got to watch out for that's looming out there is some of the grandfathering rules that are going on out here in Worcester County right now. There's a little bit of a sense of urgency because things change here going forward, and you may end up getting stuck with not being able to move the building at all, and you're back to where you're at. So, it's totally board decision and everything. I don't have a problem with if the design is done here and we have total numbers and the board feels confident that we're going to go forward with a referendum, spending the money up front to have things done. I think it's completely different. I think if you didn't, you'd be spending 140 or 172 for a design prior to being able to get a number to go to referendum. How do you go to referendum without a design? You can't.
Can I respond?
That's exactly-
Very briefly, because Bob brought up something. You essentially said that I was accusing you of being deceitful. I never said you were deceitful. You're way too sensitive, Bob. Way too sensitive.
Actually,
Believe me, you're way too sensitive. I didn't say you were deceitful.
That's what you
I
said.
said the
That's
people
not
had a number in their head of 2.5 million because that was the number that was thrown around. Now it's 4 million. That's not saying you were deceitful. I'm just saying the number was wrong.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. I did want to make a comment. Bob, I think you and Ted both said what I was going to say, but I'll say it anyway. We have a responsibility to the membership to give them the best information we can to allow them to make the best decision they can. You cannot do that without spending money to give them that information. We would be severely criticized, and I wouldn't go forward without having better information, and it's going to cost money to get that information. So to me, it's ludicrous to suggest that you can't spend any money before you ask for a referendum. How in God's name can you have the membership make an informed decision without getting the best information, and unfortunately that costs some money. But you've cited it as a factor. It's something for us to consider in terms of leveling and which firm we're going to go with, that particular factor, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Please, gentlemen, whenever you're ready for question.
Jeff Nepper, Carrollton Lane. It's not a question so much as a comment. One of the things that has gotten lost a little bit is the process that these folks went through to take this contract in and level it. Now, I have some credentials in this space. I did technology contracting for Intel Corporation. I spend $1.5 billion a year of their money. My smallest contract was bigger than this by several powers of 10. So I know what I'm talking about. We used to go through leveling processes like this. It is complex, it is difficult, and if you don't do it, you're comparing garbage, and you have no idea what you're doing, and you will get the nastiest surprise of your life. Sometimes you get a good surprise, but not very often. So what I wanted to do was comment on the process just a little bit. I thought it was an outstanding process. I thought the things that they thought about were complete. The leveling process going through was excellent. They can explain it. We had trouble occasionally explaining some of our leveling. They could explain it. And so I just wanted to let you know from the point of view of someone who knows a lot about that process, these folks did an outstanding job from start to finish of this thing. And I think you need to hear that. And it really is a very, very difficult process. But you are now looking at as apples to apples a comparison as you can have at this time. Is it perfectly apples to apples? No, and by the way, it never will be. But it's pretty close. And close right now is as good as you're going to get. So I applaud them. I think you do and you should. And I just wanted to say that for the record.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Jack Ferry, 16 Martinique Circle. Okay, just one thing, Mr. Maroney. You took the dumbwaiter out. Okay, put it back in. I'll tell you what, you're going to do the kitchen staff, you're going to do the customers a big service. They'll running up and down with those things are out of the question.
We kept a service elevator that only serves the kitchen in.
Okay.
So we originally had a
$3.5 million. The guy should put it into you. That should be a gift from the contract.
You bring up a good point. We haven't got to negotiation.
Go back in.
Any other public comment? Yes, ma'am.
I want to speak. I'm with Gillis.
Good.
So
Your name?
Nancy Holt. I'm with Gillis Gilchristen. So if you don't want me to comment, please tell me now.
Well, it's for members.
This is for members.
Okay.
I mean, you can, you're the chair.
Yeah. Well, it's
for
OPA, it's for OPA members only.
Okay. I was just in a public meeting, so I wanted to hear what was going on.
On the other hand, I don't have a problem if the consensus folks here don't. Anyone have a problem? See.
Now, there are one or two things in the scope clarifications that were not interpreted properly with what I was hearing on our bid. So I'm sure that same thing has happened with Parkins and Lehman as well. So I would think you would want to talk to the contractors as well at some point. But I want to point out that in the process in this county, you have to have site plan approval before you really proceed with your building drawing. So you're not looking at spending 60 or 140 or 162. You're really just looking at spending the value of the site plan. By the time you get your site plan done and into the county, you'll have your referendum vote back. So you're not looking at spending the dollar amounts that, it could be a lot less.
Do you think if you were awarded the contract to do that part, it would take you until August 29th to get a site plan into the county?
It's not to get it into the county, but to get it approved. It takes 60 days to get a site plan approved from the county. So unless there was a pre-approval that we're not aware of, then it takes 60 days. You can have your design in by the time the referendum vote comes about, and you can do some design work, but the bulk of the design work won't be done until after the site plan approval. And then it's a matter
We
of...
got the exact opposite from Parkins, for instance. They told us they were going to have 3 months ready to go to the county in conjunction with the site plan. So that's good information. Appreciate it.
And then the only other comment, the decking in between where the building was taken out, that was asked to be included in the bid document, so we have it in there. So if you want a credit value of that, just let me know, because I've got all that decked out and leveled.
Thank you. We'd like to credit that.
Any other public comments?
What company did you represent?
Any comments, questions from the media? Chip.
I have a question. The business plan that's expected at the end of next week, is the board going to take that into consideration as far as the plan and the design and the usage of the yacht club?
I'd say we'd have to do a certain.
Of course, yes. What would it be for? Some other
Dave?
facility?
I mean, everybody has their own opinion on this board, and just off the top of my head, if we get it next week, end of next week, and we're meeting at the end of the next week, I don't read all that yet. But even if I did, my answer would be no. And on the other hand, I think that business plan ought to be made public, and I think when we get to referendum, people of Ocean Pines ought to look at it and make up their mind, as they're going to do on all of this. It's going to be up to the people. I'm happy to let them make up their minds.
Any other comment? Well, the business plan, purpose of the business plan is to lay that just out, how the business will operate, profit, how you plan to make profit, or how you're going to reduce deficit, things you're going to do as far as with regard to service, quality of food, things you're going to do to people, and that's what the business plan is all about. So that wouldn't necessarily have anything to do with the construction of the facility. That's going to do with the operation of the facility, regardless of what the facility is.
We can have a long discussion.
We could.
about that.
I'll have as long as you want.
Well, okay, all right. I would suggest to you, sir, that the business plan and what kind of business we're running out of this building has a great deal to do with its design and its construction and what goes on with it.
Of course it does.
Hopefully, we have a pretty good idea at this point in time what kind of business we're
We've
going
been in
to
business
run.
for 40 years, so we know.
And we're looking for some numbers to wrap around that. But I don't think my personal opinion is that we're not changing the business that we're running in the yacht club.
That's what I'm
It's
saying.
not going to be a
That's
beef
what I'm
pizza.
saying.
Yeah, okay.
It will support what it is we're conceptually laying out.
That's what I'm saying.
And we're not going to be concerned with operational details at this juncture, but as Dan just said, we pretty much know the business we're in, where we have the opportunities to do a better job, and certainly I think one of the things, from my standpoint, I mean, one of the things we've got to do is improve management of the operation. Bob's got a new manager over there, and I think that's a key element in what's going on, and he's involved in the business plan, but it's going to support what we intended to do with this concept, right?
Well, I mean, we're assuming it'll be business as usual, but better. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
But better, Bob. But better. Business as usual. But when I say business as usual, we're not going to close it during the winter. We're not going to, have any radical change in concept, although that was brought up at some point during your business plan, close it in the winter. And as other people have suggested, we should, not me, but other people have. So, I mean, it's a good question, but no, I don't think, Chip, that's, going to be really relevant. I mean, is anything that we see going to absolutely convince us that we're not going to continue to lose the same amounts of money that we have been losing in the past? And I don't care, Bob. You can't tell me, how many have we had? A half a dozen business plans for the yacht club, and that's only since I've been around. So, no. I think we have to look at what we have and what we're doing and say, yeah, we get better. Maybe a new facility would make it better. Would help. I always thought that would be true.
Service. Any other questions for the team? Tom.
The extra 3 days of Bob's initial Tuesday meeting, how does that affect the rest of the timeline? Three days.
Well, that's why I asked it the way I did it.
I'll figure it out.
It does, but it's necessary.
That's what I'm saying.
It's
I mean,
necessary.
it's working. Our intent's not to put the pressure on the board to make us stand this evening. If the extra few days helps, that's great.
Request that was
No
made,
issue.
it is necessary.
We'll make it work.
We have a consensus that we wanted that extra time.
We'll make it work.
Yeah.
You think at your timeline that you just might add 3 days?
No, I can't give you a definitive answer. There are some requirements that we have to do with mailing, with some other purposes to meet public hearing. By delaying till the end of the week, that delays when I can do my public hearing, which means it takes me a week to do a notice, which then backs up the actual public hearing date. There are a number of things that back up against one another. We'll work with it.
I have a thought. After the meeting, I have a thought.
Yeah, we'll make it work.
It might add another week to everything.
He's not.
It might not add anything.
You have to sort it out.
It may
He'll
end up
make
not
it work.
adding anything. You may be able to arrange it so that it stays the same.
You might vote not to do a new building.
That's true.
Right. Absolutely.
Any other media questions?
There was one in
Just for clarification.
Identify yourself for people that know you.
Oh yeah, Nathan Burnett, Bayside Gazette. Anyway, clarification about the business plan. So there's not, with the number of seats for the whole restaurant per each of the floor plans, there's not that big of a difference. So I'm just saying, with your business plan, it's in coordination with how many people you can fit inside the restaurant. Is that correct?
Yeah, but it's not. I mean, I'm aware of all the drawings, so our plan, everything's being tailored towards one goal, and that's the most effective and efficient operation of current and moving forward, hopefully the new yacht club facility.
No, I understand that. What I'm asking about is there a big number of difference between how many people can sit in the restaurant full capacity between each plan? Is there that big of a difference?
No.
I think one thing that maybe you're failing to realize, if I may, is that the specs went to the contractors to be within this range of people. Okay? You probably didn't realize that, did you? Okay. They were told how many people.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Comment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, folks.